Hi, everyone. Welcome to BioDesign 2025. For everyone's information, we're going to be recording this session and then we'll make it available to everyone afterwards. So for those who couldn't join us today, they're able to log in and listen at a later date. My name's Megan Seagrave. I'm the Executive Director for Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. We are Canada's premier green chemistry business accelerator, and we also have an early stage investment fund where we do pre-seed and seed stage investments in really great novel Canadian IP in this space. So I wanted to welcome everyone. We've got 3 great panels lined up for you today. Feel free to come and go as you please. Based on interest, but I suspect that you will want to stick around for the entire session. I'm going to share my screen and just kick us off. All right, as I mentioned, welcome to BioDesign 2025. This program today is designed around new market opportunities through bio-based manufacturing, and the reason we came up with the title and the title for this event, as well as the panels associated with this event, has a lot to do with the geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in with our neighbors to the south, the new administration, and the tariff hurdles that we have been encountering basically since March of 2025, and then the new market opportunities that we're seeing from an alignment with the European market and our European neighbors. So we've got 3 panels for you today. We've got global trade dynamics and emerging markets. Going to be moderated by Chris Mathis. We've got market-driven biomanufacturing examples, where we're going to present 4 companies and their technologies, and this is going to be moderated by Wayne Madiver. We've got a 15-minute break built in, for you to use the facilities, so to speak. Grab yourselves another cup of coffee or a glass of water, and then we've got the last panel where we're going to talk about building resilience in Canadian manufacturing, which will be moderated by me. The way we're going to run today is we've got a moderator for each panel. We'll ask you to hold your questions until the end. The moderators will take control of each of the panelists. In the case of the first panel, they've got 10-12 minutes to do a presentation. We're going to hold off on questions. The second panel, again, 10 minutes to talk about their technologies and their companies. We're going to hold off on questions. The third panel, the same, 10-15 minutes for presentations, and then we're going to hold off on questions. So at the end of each panel, the moderators will, they've got some canned questions that they may or may not ask. Please submit any questions that you like through the chat. We will keep tabs of those questions, and then we will moderate them at the end of each panel. And then when we close around 3 o'clock, if you've got questions for any of the panelists or moderators related to any of the topics that you're going to become familiar with today, then by all means put them in the chat. And if we're not able to get everyone's questions answered, we'll take those and we will add a quick document when we send out the final recording to everyone, and we'll try and get everything answered. All right, so without any further ado, we're going to start with the first panel. I'll have Chris Mathis pop his camera on and do an introduction to portfolio, the first panel, and make introductions to the speakers. Go ahead, Chris.
Excellent. Hello, folks. My name's Chris Mathis. I'm VP of Portfolio, a strategic action company based in the Maritimes, working across several sectors nationally and internationally. We help clients develop informed strategies and support the execution from ideation, tech development, and protection straight through to market traction. It's an honor to moderate today's topic on global trade dynamics and emerging markets. And it's certainly timely if we're to enable Canada's strengths and capabilities as a nation. Much of our export growth is driven traditionally by global demands for our primary resources, but with significant opportunities that always have persisted for commercializing and scaling Canadian bioinnovations. That potential remains, as does the fundamental issues or foundational issues, I should say, perhaps, that persist, including regulatory commercialization gaps and infrastructure limitations and investment misalignment. We have a lot of increased awareness. We have demand for energy and food security, climate management, mitigation, all of these leading or lending towards new bioeconomic opportunities. So there's progress and solid opportunities, geopolitical context to catalyze new partnerships. By talking through some of the themes today, we hope for advancing the conversation for a more aligned national effort. And I will advance my slide. So on today's first panel, the themes that we'll be covering will be delivered through Christina Carrig from Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association, Rob Sorrow from Reynolds Stokes Engineering, and Sandy Ferguson of SF Consulting. Their bios are in the event materials. So let me simply say that these are very experienced and capable people we have today to draw from. They'll be presenting various perspectives related to leveraging industrial assets to attract low-cost, low-carbon global scale foreign direct investment, designing for market fit from the start, and blending finance with policy tools to de-risk scale-up and diversification beyond traditional partners. As mentioned, how we're running things has already been covered, so I will, without further ado, move to Christina. And please, we'll be monitoring questions in the chat. And welcome, Christina.
Thank you very much. I'm going to see if I can share my screen and make this work seamlessly today. That's always the hope. Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Unfortunately, so far so good. And you were in the correct view, I hope.
No, you're not in presentation view, but
I'm not in the presentation view. My apologies. This is where me and my computer stop getting along.
That's all right, as long as you can advance down.
There we go. Absolutely. You know what? If everybody's okay with this and you're not offended by being able to see my slides, then maybe I'll just continue on. So thank you very much for having me today. This is a really exciting topic for me to speak to, although our group is a little bit different. So I am with Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association. We are an economic development agency that represents municipalities as opposed to industry within our region. So we're an organization that's about 26 years old now, and we represent the five communities that are listed below. We came together a number of years ago to identify that we had to work together to be on an international presence, basically, to market the land that we have. We've been very successful in doing this over the last 25, 26 years. We have about $45 billion worth of in-place investment into the Heartland region. What you can see there is the amount of land that we cover. So we have a defined area. We're not just central Alberta. We have 580 square kilometers of land that we go international and market the attributes to. So within our region, we have about 40 plus companies of variety of sizes that we work with to demonstrate the current capabilities and some of the attributes that can be accessed within the region.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing any slide advances.
It's not advancing. You know what? It's advancing on my other one, but it's not advancing on.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. Better. So that's my map. Thank you very much for flagging that. I'm going to actually, you know what? We're going to stick with this. We are a small organization. There's only 10 of us, but we try to be everywhere all at once. So I am part of the business development team, the manager of sustainability within that group. I work particularly on clean tech files, anything that promotes sustainability within our current industry players, but also bringing investment for new standalone technologies. We also work in the battery material space, but also traditional pet chem. Any given day, most of us are out of town. So two of my folks right now are in Europe for K-Show right now, looking at different plastics projects. We also have a government relations team, which works on an advocacy file, predominantly with the provincial and federal governments, looking at how we can basically advocate for policy and programs that keep us competitive with the jurisdictions that are competing on similar investments. So this really stemmed out of our pet chem space, where we are constantly competing with the US Gulf Coast and making sure that we are in a opportunity to provide the highest return on investment for investors. We also work in community relations and keeping our community engaged. Since we are probably considered a newer cluster, we were able to develop outside of a major population. So we're about 45 minutes outside of Edmonton. Our largest community is Fort Saskatchewan, which is about 30,000 people. We maintain a buffer of a mile from the community so that if our industry players have a bad day, that means not everybody has a bad day. We also make sure that there is a lot of community engagement in terms of open houses, if there's new projects, basically anything that makes sure that the community will always welcome us into this region. This slide, I think, is really interesting because it highlights the different products that are being produced currently within our region. Ethylene, polyethylene are probably the two staples that this region really grew up on. In the last 5 years, polypropylene came in. We've always traditionally had a lot of ammonia and, of course, hydrogen associated with that coming into this region for investment. But what really has been important is kind of the midstream and utilities the last 5-10 years and how we can leverage those assets for future developments. Some of the diversified products that we have in the region are that nickel and cobalt type product, different hydrogen peroxide, and renewable power. So we're looking at a bit of product diversification just from some of our traditional assets as well. So our job is really looking at this package on this page and seeing how we can continue to evolve it to attract further investors into the region. This slide demonstrates some of the big players that we have. Some of them will be familiar. They are very much in that oil and gas side of things. There are a few of these companies like Imperial and Dow and Shell and Nutrien that have worked on kind of clean tech and the renewable space, and we are looking to help advance some of their projects. So Imperial has just started operation on their renewable diesel project. Dow had their announcement of their path to zero polyethylene expansion where they're going to be using hydrogen. Shell has carbon capture, of course, in this region, and is also looking to support direct air capture and their other carbon capture assets that they have recently FID'd. Looking at our future opportunities, I think most of the folks on this call probably have seen a huge spike in the interest in power and what that power generation could look like. So natural gas power, behind the fence power is quite predominant here, but we have definitely seen an uptick in interest from data centers. So we are looking at how to leverage that natural gas into the data center world. We also see a lot more solar integration into industrial, so either VPPAs or else behind the fence power. We're also looking at how you would integrate small modular nuclear power into the region, primarily for steam. We also have two carbon capture projects that are currently operating, with Atlas and Polaris being the next investment. And then we have had this robust interest in direct air capture projects come into the region. So we're supporting those through our current infrastructure. Bioindustrial, we are looking at the different feedstock opportunities that we have and which chemical pathways can be the most economically viable in this region. We've found that because we are a small population base, Alberta has 5 million people-ish, and trying to move feedstocks around can be one of the biggest challenges for these projects. So we're really looking for those projects that the margins are high and they can kind of take into account what that transportation piece looks like. I will end on talking about the battery material space that we are looking into. Just by nature of some of the facilities that we have within our region and the infrastructure that we have to move around different products, we found that we're actually a very good space to evaluate battery materials projects, especially working in a time where security and defense is becoming more predominant. We're seeing a lot more interest in that space. And if I can figure.
Oh. Well, that was that was very effectively delivered. I hope she rejoins. It looks like she hit the wrong button. I have done that many a time. That was terrific. The next speaker is Rob Sorrow. And there you are, Rob. Awesome. You want to share your...
All right, everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Did Rob freeze for you?
I think so. Initially, I thought he was just looking at the screen to get the right screen selected.
My apologies for my unceremonious departure.
Christina, you did a very effective delivery, and thank you very much. We're just awaiting. It looks like Rob may have frozen, so hopefully he rejoins and can show his screen. Thank you, Christina.
If Rob's frozen, we can move on to Sandy.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Sandy.
Poor Rob. Oh, it's always so awful when you're frozen. That's happened to me. But is he back? I just saw something happen.
I think he's just left, and so we'll proceed. Thanks, Sandy.
Okay. And Megan has kindly offered to run the slides just because I seem to be having a problem with Teams Share at the moment. Chris, thanks so much. And Megan, thank you for inviting me to join. I've got a few different hats on here today. Here is very proud to be a Bioindustrial Innovation Canada board director. I also work as an independent consultant, and I do a lot of my work currently with Foresight. And I'll have you move forward so that I can see the next slide. So Foresight, which is quite well known in Western Canada, starting to become more well known across the country, has done work with a number of the bio organizations that are here today, including BIC. We do think of ourselves as Canada's largest clean tech network or accelerator. We have quite a large number of clean tech, and that's a very broad description. You'll see in a minute kind of what that covers. Companies that we work with. We also have quite an active stable of what we call executive in residence and mentors, people who have a lot of experience and who we pair with many of our emerging companies. We have quite a large network with private capital partners, national and global partners. That includes strategic, industry strategics, and do a lot of simply connecting people, as well as, if you go to the next slide, we run a number of programs, again, primarily in the past has been oriented at the innovator space. So Kickstart is when you're kind of at the beginning of your journey and you're trying to get your roadmaps together. Launch and Deliver is as you're moving into the scale up. Residency is when you have ongoing specific areas in your business that you want to focus on. And then growth, which we all know that with innovators, that kind of pivotal point is when you're trying to get out of the valley of death and into revenue generation. We cover agriculture, bio, sorry, if you can just leave it on that slide. agriculture bio build, which is the built environment, which includes wood products and bio. Agri includes some bio. Carbon includes some bio. Power includes some bio, and water next. So the bioeconomy is well represented across all of those areas. Please go ahead. I just wanted to do a shout out, our core program, which is 6 webinar sessions over a 3-month period, are focused around bringing experts from across Canada, whether they are funders or people who are technology focused. They may be success stories, those who were similar to where some of our innovators have been and are maybe anywhere from 3 to 10 years up the scale. We also do mentorship and have those executive and residents available during that program. So our next one is January to March, and I encourage you to look on the Foresight website under bioeconomy. Zach Miko, my colleague, will be able to work with you just in terms to find out if it's a fit for your needs. Okay, so that's a little bit about the world of the accelerator. I was asked to speak on government policy and financing today, which are 2 very important tools. So government has a lot of levers to help an emerging industry. It's been the case for almost every industry that has grown and become a pillar of the Canadian economy. Bioeconomy is no different at an earlier stage than, say, for example, our traditional fossil fuel industry. And the government has a number of ways in which they can prime the pump, so to speak. And I stole this slide from my friend Jeff Passmore. Just want to do a shout out for his event in November, Scaling Up. And he put this slide together, and I thought I couldn't really do any better. So I might as well just take his slide and give him credit. So we've got policies, a host of them, and those are some of the biggest mandates. That really creates the market pull through many of these government policies. You're familiar with net zero, carbon tax, the Clean Fuels Fund, and plastics bans. All of those drive innovation and create products that can address those policy mandates. We also have a good tax credit environment in Canada, getting better all the time. I think through the good work of organizations like BIC and others who have been advocating to government to ensure that we do include bioeconomy in many of the tax credit programs that are out there. Tax policy, also very critical. I'm sure many of you who started out early, and those of you who are still there, I mean, the SHRED program is a terrific source of funding for anyone who's in the innovation space, which most of the bioeconomy, I would argue, is there. We've got the ethanol and the diesel mandates federally, and also low carbon fuel standard in British Columbia has been a huge driver in creating interest. And in some cases now we're starting to see production of those products in British Columbia as a result of those programs. We have volume targets, which means we have to use a certain amount of those products here in Canada. Performance targets, and of course, programs. I'm going to talk about those in the next slide, which is non-dilutive funding, and then procurement programs. I would say we have a long way to go before we're going to catch up with the Americans. I have heard the Carney government speak more to ensuring that we start to buy Canadians. The BioPreferred program in the US, if you're looking at that market, fairly easy to get yourself registered there. I don't know if anything has changed in the last little while. Anyone who has experience, throw in a comment into the chat. But BioPreferred, once you're registered, you are eligible for preference in terms of government procurement in the United States. So go ahead, Megan, let's go to the next slide. That's the beginning. So, okay, so you're probably all watching quite avidly to see what happens with the Carney government. How different, given it's a Liberal government, is it going to be to the Trudeau government. I think the one thing that you want to be aware of is, unlike in past governments, all of the government ministers were given essentially the same set of mandate letters. And those mandate letters include these 7 areas. So, of course, we are looking at establishing a new economic and security relationship with the US and strengthening collaboration with other partners. That's key. The one Canadian economy and removing barriers to interprovincial trade. This would definitely help the bioeconomy. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some real activity in that area. Reducing costs for all Canadians, it's certainly been an issue, I would argue, in almost every jurisdiction, not just in Canada. The affordability of housing and building more housing is a core area. Again, that plays in nicely to the bioeconomy. Canadian sovereignty and just really beefing up our defense. Again, there's lots of opportunities in there for the bioeconomy. Talent attraction, and also reducing government operations. So there are many areas in there that fit, I think, very well with the bioeconomy. The devil will be in the details as we move forward into this next budget. And I think what Carney has said is we are here for a once in a generational challenge. But if your type of activity that you're doing doesn't fit into any of these priorities, you better figure out a way to shift and make that case, because this is what, in terms of government support, this is what they're looking for. Please go ahead. Next slide.
4 minutes, Sandy.
Yep, I just have 3 slides left.
Perfect.
So I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can read it afterwards. These are announcements that have just come out in the last month. I would say very important for you to look to what's going to come out in the 2026 budget. Megan, help me out here. Is that in November now? Is that when we're expecting it?
Yeah, they're
I think
going to announce the budget in November, and they're actually going to change the budget schedule so that it's not a spring budget anymore. It's going to remain a fall budget, and then they'll do a spring economic statement. So the reverse of what they've been doing in the past.
So that's where you'll get a lot of clues about what's happening with programming. But I do encourage you all, if you already have relationships, so you know the departments that you're particularly interested in, please get in touch with them now, because many of them do already have an idea of where their focus is going to be, and they're looking to fine tune. And the more they know about what you're doing, the better. There's a lot that has gone into strategic response funds. Those are very important at the strategic industry player level, the big companies. Those are often your partners. They're often your customers, your end users, or your demonstration site partners. So we need them to be whole and healthy. And certainly, as many of you know, in the forest sector right now, that has been a huge challenge with the level of duties and also some of the issues related to fiber, in particular in British Columbia, probably a little less in some of the other provinces. There's some support that's gone for biofuel production incentives, and then also tariff response to SMEs, and that'll largely be delivered through the regional development agencies. So get to know your Pacific Can and your Prairie Can and FedNor and I forget the Quebec one, and then ACOA in the east. Last slide, I think. Okay, so here are some examples. I thought it was important, and I will probably get it more on the panels. Think about your funding partners from the perspective of you've got some non-dilutives, and those typically, that means they're not going to take equity. It might be a grant or it might be a repayable loan. Typically, it's usually somewhere within the government. Federal, provincial, regional development agencies. If you don't know about the Clean Growth Hub, you should have a look at it. It'll kind of list out any of the particular funding programs, hopefully currently, because they come and go, as you all know. Sometimes they're there for a few years. Sometimes they may only have one intake. Your equity partners are key, early stage, friends, family, angel investors. Many of those come through your mentoring network, so get plugged into those. Venture capital is crucial as you develop a pathway to revenue. You don't need to have revenue, but you need to have a pathway. And then you have your debt funders who will definitely want to see revenue already there. And you have a host of government, crown, and private and not-for-profit funders in that space. And then we've got the blends. So your not-for-profit accelerators like BIC, like Green Spring Bioinnovation Hub in Nova Scotia, Foresight, and Natural Products Canada is another good one. These are evolving and changing, so you got to scan regularly, you got to build relationships so you're on top of when the next calls may come out. Also may have the opportunity to influence what some of those calls come from. I think I did have one more slide. Can I just take one last tiny one? I'll be super quick, 30 seconds here. Yes. So there's lots of resources out there. Have a look. Foresight's got export opportunities for the bioeconomy research report. If you're interested in a market, take a look at whether or not they have a national bioeconomy strategy. It'll give you lots of tips around the areas that you want to focus on, where perhaps there's the best opportunities. And then finally, the European Union is far ahead of us in having had a bioeconomy strategy, I don't know, for the last 15 years. They currently are working on their next one, and they will be coming out with a lot of information around how you might plug into that. And I think we'll get into that on the panel. So with that, thank you, Megan, for moving the slides.
Awesome, Sandy. Thank you. Lots of information there. Rob, I'm hoping you can, you are back, and hopefully we can connect your slide
You prefer
presentation.
Megan? Would you like to share mine?
Do you want to try, Rob? And if not, I've got the PDF up right here, so happy to share it.
Microsoft had other plans for me this morning.
Yes, it happens. Hey.
Awesome.
There we go. Okay, I was sort of a mid-stage addition filling in for Chris. I was assigned the topic of meeting the needs of new markets. Okay, start off with some qualifiers and agendas. This is just a sharing of ideas. We are a private sector business, and this is not about selling you engineering services. I do tend to use the term development, commercialization interchangeably as they pertain to the bio industry. You'll also notice, and thank you for having someone from Alberta on the line here, I do mix the bio industry and traditional industry. I do consider them complementary, and there's a lot of overlap both in skill set and capacity. As far as an agenda, we'll start with a basic intro. We'll talk about new markets, Canada's edge, roadblocks, my main theme, which is finding your niche in the market, and then some closing comments. This slide is inserted for anybody who needs to find me. I assume that these PDFs or these presentations are shared by PDF eventually. A little bit about me. I'm the president of RSEI, senior process engineer. I'm actually a chem eng. I'm experienced in most sectors, and my basic interests are charity work. This is the closest thing to a business development slide. Our firm focuses on traditional classical engineering, usually what we coin to be the hard stuff, anything that's involved in plant design, conventional or otherwise. I do have to qualify as well. This qualifier gets its own special topic or its own special slide. I'm pretty passionate about Canada's role in the bioeconomy and the commercialization of IP, and I do and I will insist on discussing multimodal engineering and the overlap between traditional industry and the bio industry. We even went as far as to write the commercialization of Canadian technology into our corporate charter, and that'll appear on our website as well. Why we often get asked why we even want to be in the space, and we found that it's an effective use of our resources. We hire based on caliber, and so we have a The office is just full of high caliber staff with a diverse skill set. We also invest in engineering tools for anybody. I wouldn't imagine many of you have set up either engineering divisions or engineering companies, but the amount of infrastructure that you require is pretty significant. And so we already have a lot of those tools. And as any engineering firm, we have some non-billable time to do the right thing. We'd initially started with the bioindustry as a bridge across the Valley of Death. More or less anybody on the line here knows what the Valley of Death is. And as Chris and I were discussing yesterday, the bioindustry is very much the new economy. It's not to say that the old economy is dead, but the bioindustrial world is the new economy. As far as back to the caliber of the staff, when you have all high caliber staff, you do need marquee projects to feed that machine, and that's how we got into this world. And fortunately, the bioindustry is a world that these tend to be the sorts of projects that my staff will brag about at dinners and such. So to look at how we could meet the needs of new markets, I really want to talk about where Canada fits, where we all fit. I mean, I hate to break it to all of us or everyone here, we are the pioneers of this industry. And I'm also going to talk about where a small, medium-sized engineering firm would fit, and that's very much a big part of my theme. Now, this slide on the bottom right has the company motto, which is numbers never lie, and that's a huge part of what we do. When it comes to the bioindustry, the numbers have to balance, the initiative has to make money, it has to be a good idea. Everything else goes out the window when the initiative is eventually found to not be feasible. It's important talking about the bioindustry and meeting new markets in Canada. You really have to give some praise for Canada. I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world for work, and Canada makes what the world needs. And by needs, I really wanted to capture, and I used an image of Maslow's hierarchy, like the food, shelter, warmth, like the basic needs. Canada has all of that, and we have it in abundance, and we really just have to figure out a way to get it to the world. Canada, this slide here, I apologize, is somewhat more Ontario than I wanted it to be. Canada, and especially Southern Ontario, has been very successful just doing what we've done. We do have another natural resource that we should and could, and hopefully we are capitalizing on, and that is our ingenuity. I use this slide in the images in the slide just to explain where the bioindustry would, should, or could go. In Canada, especially in Ontario, we have a very developed auto sector, and I've had the honor of being able to see at Honda a coil of steel over the course of 24, 27 hours, I don't quite recall, but turn into a Honda Civic. So if you take Canada as a country, we were able to mine the ore, process the ore, convert it into galvanneal coil steel, and eventually value add it into a car. So it's not really a new concept to Canadians to take something from the original prime natural resource to the final finished product. But I would say that this is our duty and very much how we've built our company. And these are the new industries. The automotive is very much established, but why not take those learnings into agriculture, fishery, forestry, etc. So Canada's edge, whether it may seem boastful or otherwise, we have what the world wants and needs. As a resource, we are near infinite with regards to resources. We have boundless technology. We are lucky enough to have financial stability and reputability within the financial. We're investable, if you will. And as a country, less so, but as industries, certainly financially stable in there. We also have an abundance of universities, and those have two facets that are attractive within this world. The first being we have this perpetual machine producing research and development, and we also have a high caliber workforce. As someone who hires internationally, travels internationally, it is important to note that in Canada, we're one of the few countries where a post-secondary education is still very attainable for everyone. All right, so the roadblocks, and I know we're going to get into some of these in the panel later, but some of the roadblocks when it comes to the bioindustry and developing technology within the bioindustry is firm size. There's always a tendency for someone to think of a firm of 20, 30, 40,000 man hours as being a very small firm, but the reality is that I started in the industry 25 years ago. I have a person here who can do what maybe 10 mechanical eng techs did when I started my career. So a small firm is very much different in the industry now. Fragmentation, I think this is a topic that we're going to get to in one of the panels, so I won't really dwell on it. Same with the academic side and the academic roadblocks. The publish or perish mentality is something that I've more recently learned about. And sometimes when it comes to roadblocks in the bioindustry, sometimes clients believe that they believe in their technology, and whatever you are saying, it just couldn't possibly be right. And some don't like to hear what you have to tell them. And so, thank you. Bioindustrial project paths. So the bioindustrial, just like any other project, what we do very specifically when it comes to the bioindustrial projects is we allow the client the option. They can either commercialize their plant and eventually turn it into the bricks and mortar that become the plant, or convert the plant into an initiative or some sort of a business case that they could sell to another entity. All right, so meeting the needs of new markets, and this is actually the purpose of my presentation. And I'm going to highlight here that how to meet the new markets for all of us, the pioneers, is really just finding your niche. Early stage entrepreneurial dilemmas: when someone walks into our office, they don't have a lot of money, and it's the engineering work that allows them to move forward. They will get the funding if they just had the P&ID, the single line diagram, or otherwise. Mass and energy balance is some sort of validation. We're able to get them that one step further if we can. RCI's work. Essentially, we are that missing piece that allows clients to get that next step, whether it's funding, whether it's validation, even in some cases taking them to commissioning and construction. So our niche is just that, and this is the purpose of my presentation: is finding your niche and filling that niche. The two spots that we've been able to fill in the bioindustry is project development, taking it from the idea to the P&IDs, the 3D model, the single line diagram, and of course a concept that we developed here called bespoke engineering, which is, it's pretty difficult to set up an engineering division at a startup when you're developing new technology, and so we serve as that resource for clients within this industry. I'll skip over any of the quantitative stuff and just go right to my closing comments. So as far as meeting the needs of new markets, as the pioneers in this industry, and whether we like it or not, that is us. That is how we would meet the needs of new markets. Find your niche. Canada has what the world needs. Offer it. Use your skills towards that. And the rest is up to us.
Awesome, Rob. Thank you. So I'd like to encourage questions to be coming forward into the chat. We'll monitor that in real time. I'll open up with a few questions and hopefully some additional yes and questions can be coming from the crowd today. Christina, why don't I start with you? How does your existing infrastructure, and you can describe that a little bit in terms of various forms of infrastructure a little bit further from your presentation, but how do you see that helping the investment progress for bio-based products?
For sure. I think probably the two biggest component pieces that I see have been attributing most of their value to the bio space is, first off, basically our transportation and logistics. What we're seeing for moving feedstocks into the region, because we are in the heart of an agricultural area. If you're looking for forestry products, anything else of that nature, you are transporting it a bit further. And so just having access to rail and basically good roads for trucking in, what we see within our region, because we have both railways coming through with such regularity, the service that we get within our region is very high quality. If you talk to some of our forestry partners in northern Alberta, I've heard stories of, we needed 10 cars, but we got 3 cars and they came 2 weeks late. That's not something you find in the heartland, just because we have that sheer amount of volume that keeps CN and CP busy. We also have quite a number of investments that have gone through for our short line rail folks as well. That helps move that product around. So that's one key attribute for sure. The second is access to carbon capture sequestration. So we do have Quest, which is operating in the region, but that is primarily just for Shell. We have the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, which is an open carbon capture pipeline that basically, if you are willing to support the investment for that pipeline connection, then Wolf can sequester that for you. Currently, they're doing enhanced oil recovery in southern Alberta, but they are getting into the sequestration business, as that's where the investment tax credits lie. So those pieces of infrastructure definitely help. We're in a region where you can tie into utilities. Power is very critical. We're not necessarily known as a region for having a lot of renewables within the jurisdiction, because the land price is prohibitive to doing the mass amounts of wind or solar. But virtual power purchase agreements are very common in this area. Also leveraging that history and experience we have in the traditional fossil fuel sectors, what we're seeing is there are a bunch of folks who are kind of in their later stages of their career who have left some of the big oil and gas companies and are now going into the bio space. And they're really using that knowledge of how Alberta operates and the connections you need and how you get your financing to support some of these startups that might have younger managerial teams, basically. So those are probably the largest aspects that we've seen.
That's excellent, Christina. Thanks. A question from the group that was completely aligned to a question I had for you as well. So this is wonderful. Can you take just a few minutes and describe the AI Edge model, the business model, and how that's, if you think about the, a short SWOT, what are the major benefits and what are you seeing as perhaps evolutionary opportunities for improvement?
Sure. So we have a very unique business model for this association. So we were given seed money years ago, and our members do contribute annually. But basically, any additional funds that we need for the organization comes from a fraction of the property taxes that are received after a facility has been up and running for a year. So we do not get any additional funding just because we have to demonstrate that we are bringing value to the region. So we all know that FIDs, we used to be able to hang our hat and say, okay, this is going to be a for sure. That is definitely not the case anymore. We've seen steel in the ground and those projects have still gone away. So we do not receive any additional funding until those projects are operational. That, in my mind, helps with the community support in terms of lobbying the government for any further programming. So in Alberta, we have the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program that also falls in line with this, that if you are a petrochemical producer, you will not receive the APIP funding until you are operational. So the community has already achieved the economic development attributes that you would hope for. So you've had construction, somewhere between 100 to 2,000 construction workers at peak, somewhere in that region. You've had the capital spend within the region already. So there's already been money coming back into the economy that supports any incentives or grants that come forward. Because we've worked in this model, we were also successful in having our municipalities also offer an incentive program focused particularly on developing industrial within this region. And I think having the community together and demonstrating their willingness to have industrial here, it has really supported the community. And we all know that your population can really hinder project development. And if the community is buying in and seeing that there's value, we don't get any community pushback saying they don't want any further development. In fact, they're actually quite welcoming, and they see it as an opportunity for future jobs.
Excellent. Thanks, Christina. Another question. It's really a great thing to understand. So if a company is reducing greenhouse gas emissions for upstream and downstream stakeholders, what is the status of carbon credits as a potential revenue source for bio companies? I would open that up to different people's perspective on the panel. Insert music. Da, 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 da.
Well, Christina, I think when it talks about upstream and downstream, that's really in the oil and gas. So why don't you take it, and then I'll add a few comments about forestry.
So I think right now Alberta is an interesting flux because we've recently announced restructuring of TIER. So at first, Premier had capped our carbon tax at $95, and now there's been adjustments to TIER, which is putting into question which players in the system are going to see that as very beneficial, and which projects were depending on monetizing carbon credits for future investment into clean tech. So I think right now in Alberta, carbon credits is let's wait and see what happens with this latest decision, and we'll keep you posted. That's why I definitely hesitate on commenting on this one.
Sandy.
Okay.
Yeah, in British Columbia, we've had a little, I guess we've had not a little, it's been a big program, the low carbon fuel standard, which is one of your revenue stacks. And of course, if you go into the United States with your fuel products, you can then also be looking at the federal and state credit programs. So, they're really important to your revenue stack. It's harder to find them when you're talking about bioproducts non-fuel related. There just isn't a lot out there. In the forest sector, we've seen a lot of carbon credit programs that are related to conservation set-asides, but haven't seen them in the actual operations, which is where we could really take advantage of reducing GHG emission. And I think everyone here has been aware of the wildfires that have really gone across Canada, very significant in British Columbia, but also have hit other parts of Canada. So making sure we're using that biomass that is sitting in salvage or stands that are diseased or fire impacted, as well as getting the residuals from the side is actually something that Foresight's been working on a project with the Pulp and Paper Coalition. Right now, because of the issues around permanence, long-lived products are expected to be over 100 years. That's tough to do when you have wood as your base. So it's going to be a little while before we get the right mechanisms in place, but they would be always hugely helpful for your revenue stack. So we encourage them, but it's always a lot of work to get new carbon credits put in place.
So just as a follow-on clarification, Sandy, what are your thoughts or experience related to the the opportunities for organic materials capturing and reducing greenhouse gases? And are there standards out there that are recognizing those in an effective way for companies coming forward?
Well,
There's
we have
sorry.
BECCS here in Canada, right? The biomass carbon capture and storage. It tends to be geographically specific. So Alberta we have a company, you're probably familiar with Mercer, who is in northern Alberta. Christina, you may be familiar with them, and they're looking at carbon capture and storage because the geological formation is just very acutely matched well to their facility site. And I heard their CEO mention the other day on a webinar that he expects going forward that more of their revenue will probably come from the carbon capture and storage and the credits they'll receive from that than they probably will from their wood products. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but it's kind of an example.
Yeah, I think one of the things that would be great to call out is, you know, for instance, in renewable natural gas, your carbon intensity factor impacts what your offtake agreement's going to look like from a revenue perspective, right? The equivalent for ocean carbon reduction would be another kind of bucket, let's say, or a segment of decarbonization. But when you have organic material conversion, so waste converted, and the offset of that waste otherwise turning into various forms of GHGs, where those standards may sit and what kinds of opportunities there are for those companies. Because as we scale those up, hopefully, we're overlapping nicely with some of these other existing examples that you brought forward.
Well, I really hope that, you know, the Prime Minister is able to deliver on, you know, breaking down walls across Canada, because standards across Canada are still very prohibitive, much less trying to get into the European Union. So I think, you know, we'll probably talk about that a bit more in the panel, but standard certification, carbon intensity, you have to look at the product you're making and which of those is the most important, probably all of them. But where do you want to focus your effort on first? In the fuel space, just about all the jurisdictions that have low carbon fuel standards are looking at carbon intensity as being the key driver. So, you know, under 20 parts per milligram is kind of a standard now, whereas 5 years ago, it would have been considered extremely difficult.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of build on that, just because of one of the things that we are really seeing in this investment attraction space is the requirement to meet lower carbon intensity is very dependent on the profile of the power going into these facilities. And a lot of them take on a significant amount of power. Alberta, definitely the challenge is that we have a deregulated market. And we have had a lot of fluctuation in the energy market currently. So pricing has been a little bit opaque the last probably couple of years. Now we're having discussions about data centers coming in, and they are also interested in that renewable power. Well, a data center that is being, you know, these are large scale mega projects in some case, they have the dollars to spend on that renewable power if it's of interest to them. They also, the first intention will probably be grid, because even to get a gas turbine right now is 5-7 years to do that. So we have these larger players that are in the market competing for that power. Oddly enough, this is one of the reasons why the DAC companies have been coming up. They were federally funded in the United States through grants. It didn't matter how much money they had received, they couldn't compete on the power. And then they moved up. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure pieces that are currently under demand by a lot of players. And I don't think you're going to necessarily have, you know, especially the Alberta government, you know, kind of pick winners and losers within that space, because nobody knows how much time it's also going to take for any of these things to move forward into what scale.
Yes. So that's great. I think, Rob, do you have anything you would like to add to this line of conversation at this point? I have another question for you too, but
not too much I can add. I think in the private sector, what we get is a lot of what we do is formulaic. So the clients would approach us, but your clients would approach us with all of the factors, and we include those in the feasibility analysis. But Christina really touched on something for us, which is uncertainty. There's a lot of qualifiers with regards to carbon valuation and monetization, and I will say it's a bigger part of the calculations that we do. But the calculations we do usually center around sensitivity analysis, like what if the credit is this? What if the credit is that? Does the initiative still remain feasible?
Yeah, excellent. Let's move on to another question. Rob, you did touch on post-secondary collaborations. And if you think about your experiences to date, and you referenced universities, but of course there's also the colleges, and they operate distinctly differently in many situations. So, what would you say is the most important aspects to consider going forward in terms of building and working collaboratively for emerging market solutions?
I say treating the universities as the individuals, or sorry, the staff at the universities, treating them as the individuals that they are. Don't necessarily think of the university as a whole. It's actually the staff themselves. Now, the university, there is a sort of a top-down approach when it comes to commercialization, IP, development of projects, but it's really the staff and the motivators of the individuals that are key. When it comes to commercialization, I think the post-secondary, we have far more experience with the post-secondary at the university level, R&D and such. I will say that they do have to incentivize commercialization. Like as an engineer, just naturally, it always confused me that a researcher would stop at a publication and attend a few conferences and then move on. For us, we always want to see it turn into something. And so I think that if the universities could both incentivize the researchers and promote them based on their ability and their statistics related to commercialization.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Christina and Sandy, on that topic?
Well put. I don't have anything else to add.
Christina?
I might just add some of the experience that we see where we've seen technologies come out of the post-secondary. I think it's pretty common to most of the technologies that we see that are looking to pilot or, get up to demonstration. It is a lot of work. It is a ton of work. And what we've identified is that when we are getting new technologies to our door, if they're at a TRL 6 or 7, in the span of a year, I can see almost the entire staff turnover. It is such challenging work, and then to get that traction that's required to do that first build up and the learning curve on how to basically evolve the project. It's the true project development side and getting into the ground has been just absolutely stifling on some of these really great technologies. So I can't say that I see technology problems. What I see is just these hurdles that there requires to be so much more support in the environment to get folks to that next level.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just add one comment, and it's collaboration between the various partners in the ecosystem. That's where we really are challenged, I believe, in Canada. We have great universities and colleges, research institutes. We have great entrepreneurship. We have some really great, traditional industries that are best in class. How well do they all work together? Do we have the overarching mandates and strategies to ensure that we're getting the full supply chain working together? I think that's been recognized as really important. And the universities, the only thing I'll say about them is, some of them work really well within those ecosystems. Others, the IP policies that they have sometimes makes it a little tough. So that's if we're gonna say a few controversial remarks, I think that's an area we really need to think about.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. Actually, Sandy, can we expand a little bit for the benefit of the audience on the financing instruments that you're seeing and what fits from your perspective, what you're seeing, at least in terms of fitting biomanufacturing scale up and targeting other types of new markets like these?
So a lot of it depends on the stage that you're at. So if you're at early stage, you really need that non-dilutive financing because you're probably not going to be able to attract venture funding or certainly not debt or equity. If you're going into a new market, look for a strategic partner. You can fast track a lot of things by working with large strategic partner who's looking for a type of technology, maybe to demonstrate it, maybe to help fund you. They may want to do it in their marketplace, or they may be willing to fund and support you here in Canada. So, those two are very important in the earlier stages as you start to move along the cycle. You've got, don't forget about EDC. It's a great organization, Export Development Credit Organization. Debt, typically you're going to have more luck with that in your home country, but venture capital, government programs, depending on where you actually site your project, that can be certainly on the VC side in almost any market. And VCs are interested not just typically in companies that are in their home jurisdiction, but those that they see as really providing some of the breakthrough technologies. I will say, and I'm sure those of you who've been to Europe, they tend to have more and larger funding throughout the entire supply chain. Just again, I'll raise Mercer just because I heard their CEO speak recently, and he mentioned 50% of their lignin pilot facility in Germany was funded through a government incentive. So, we do have a wonderful program in IFID. It will be replenished for next year, which is great. That's at Natural Resources Canada in and around the forest feedstock side. And that program, though, typically 30%, and the size of the projects certainly wasn't a lignin pilot plant size. So, the kind of what the government wants to see is go big and fast. However, to get big and fast, you have to grow from something. So,
Yeah.
That disconnect, I think, will start to become more apparent, and hopefully, we'll start to make sure that the full supply chain is supported and not just big major projects. I don't know how all of that's going to work out just yet.
Yep. Thank you, Sandy. I agree. I personally have witnessed some tremendous investments from the European government that really fit into that, as Rob mentioned earlier, the Valley of Death, and you have this time frame, especially in the biomanufacturing space, where scaling up and demonstrating significant value at scale is important for the investment to really come in, especially in North America, where those are uncertainties that a lot of our investors are not interested in backing. And when you have a government base that is also adverse to those earlier stage risks, then you have a number of challenges to the acceleration models. Rob, any thoughts on this before we move to final comments?
Nope, I think that it was said best before me.
I think your approach to addressing some of the Valley of Death is certainly something people could be following up with if they're interested. Well, you know what? There's a nice follow-on question here from one of the member attendees. Would you say the Valley of Death exists globally or especially noticeable in Canada? And how can government help bridge this gap from research to commercialization? Perhaps that's the best way of rounding off our time on this first panel, if you address this in 3 sentences tops. Sandy, why don't we start with you?
No, I think the Valley of Death exists globally. It's not something that's unique to Canada. What we have done exceptionally well in Canada, though, is support a lot of our early stage companies from research to pilot and demonstration. The scale up side of it perhaps is where we haven't been as effective with the same kinds of large dollar mechanisms that we've seen in some of the other jurisdictions. So, but if we all of a sudden switch to just scale up support, how are we going to nurture the latest and greatest of the new technologies? Because we all know, technology is constantly changing and evolving. So it's kind of a bit of a balance game. Maybe I'll end on that.
Excellent. Christina?
Yeah, for sure. So what we've definitely seen in this space is there needs to be a government bridge of some capacity. A lot of the programs that we have within our jurisdiction, new technologies have to have an industry partner to help support their project. And our constituents are more hesitant to do it. It's not necessarily their place unless they really have a passion for that project and see the value proposition in it for themselves. And so you see a lot of these scale-up opportunities struggling to find a location, an off-taker, how are they getting to market? So is there a mechanism to help provide some certainty that after you do go find the dollars to scale up, that you have a client at the end that's willing to pay you the value of the product that you need for you to be economic, basically.
Excellent. Rob.
I think I agree with everybody. Yes, the Valley of Death, it exists internationally. As far as what governments can do, I think maybe vetting both the technologies and the individuals involved in the sector. There could be a bit more of that, finding entities that are a little bit more motivated. And this is really the reason and the theme of my presentation, which was, finding your niche. We found that there weren't many capable engineering firms willing to participate in this. You can't really treat this as a profit center. You have to be in it for the right reasons. And if something standing between our client and $25 million worth of funding is some PNIDs, a single line diagram, and a heat and mass balance, well, we have people in here that do that, and we will figure out a way to get that done. And so, yeah, finding the right people and the people with the right motivations is probably the best way that the government could help.
Excellent. Well said. Well, thank you, folks. I'm going to post a few takeaways. Things that I heard definitely is build where you can scale, but work with your local ecosystem as much as possible to advance your opportunity. Design for your market niche, and not thinking just Canada. Focus on where there's the biggest demand and opportunity. Always being mindful of the certifications and other regulations, and then stacking your finance and lending instruments to underwrite as much of the risk as possible. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris and Christina and Sandy and Rob. Very much appreciated the first panel, Global Trade Dynamics and Emerging Markets. And I think something to keep in mind is a lot of the technologies that you're going to hear about today and the opportunities around those technologies are not just from a North American market perspective, but definitely a European market perspective because of all of the questions that were addressed in the last panel. So I'm going to ask Wayne Madiver to turn his camera on because I know he's here, but I just don't see him yet. All right. Well, awesome. So I'd like to welcome Wayne Madiver, who is the portfolio manager for BIC, Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. Wayne's the behind the scenes guy who helps and works with and identifies the early stage technology companies that BIC puts investments in. So he not only helps identify the technologies, but he puts the teams together to do the due diligence on these technologies. And for this panel, he is going to introduce you to 4 technologies here in Canada that are going to talk about how their market-driven biomanufacturing is actually meeting unique market needs. So Wayne, I'll hand it off to you and Great. We can go from there. Thanks.
And hopefully all systems are go and you can hear me. One never knows, but thank you, Megan. Yeah, today this session is really about folks that are moving down that commercialization path and some very unique companies with unique solutions to unique problems. All of which involve chemistry and biomanufacturing. So the 4 folks that I have today to introduce, and I will just introduce them by their name and their company name, and I'll let them give a brief introduction about their backgrounds. But David Heinemann from FireRain, Juha Havarainen, and I hope I got that right, from Talari, Tom Whitten from Green Graphite, and Ron Hoffman from Six Ring. And I have the pleasure of knowing both Tom and David, as they are companies in our portfolio at BIC. Gentlemen, I'm going to try and rule with an iron hand here and try and keep you to 10 minutes. So I will give you a 1-minute warning, but if you can give a brief introduction of yourself, I might give you 11 or 12, but you'll be pushing it then. You'll have my wrath and even more important, that of Megan on your back. But I'll start with David, David Hyman, who is the Chief Science Officer at FireRain, and over to you, David.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm hoping, can you see my first slide?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So as Wayne said, BIC has been a great supporter of FireRain, and we can get into that maybe more towards the end. I'm the Chief Science Officer at FireRain. FireRain's a 13-year-old company. I've been with the company about half that time and came on board to get our bio-based fire suppression product to the point where it could go to market. And the founders, who were all firefighters, quipped when they were looking at what was out in the market and what they wanted from a product from FireRain, was that they wanted it safe enough to eat. And that I wouldn't want to eat what we've made, but it is safe enough to eat. And so that is a paradigm shift in the fire suppression market. And to echo a lot of items from the first presentation or first session, being disruptive and taking advantage of what Canada has to offer and finding our niche. Our niche is not making another foam like everybody else. Our niche is being different, and that has good points and some barriers that have presented themselves. So on to the next slide. So a little bit more about what we have made. We have made a product called EcoGel, which is a patent certified 100% bio-based hydrogel, and it is non-toxic, safe enough to eat, and biodegradable. And there was talk earlier about the UL BioPreferred program. We are the only fire suppression product in the world that has both the UL BioPreferred and the USDA bio-based product certifications to say that we're 100% bio-based. We get carbon-14 dating done every 2 to 3 years to keep that certification. And the RU symbol down at the bottom on the left is a recognition mark from UL. One of the barriers that I mentioned was that we aren't a foam, so we don't behave like a foam, so all the certifications for foams don't work. So we have tested against the efficacy of fire suppression for a number of different types of fires, but we don't meet the full certification. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next slide. And on the right are just a few things. No PFAS, and I'm sure everybody, hopefully by now, has heard of PFAS and the implications of that. It's in both the foams and in the bunker gear that is used. So we are bio-based, but we like to say well protected. So we have patents in a number of jurisdictions around the world, including Canada and the US, obviously, on both our base product and applications of our base product and different formulations that address specific market needs. We also have a trade secret production process. So that is another layer of intellectual property protection. And one of the things I want to say, there was the talk about, tap into your ecosystem. The picture on the right is an 8,000 kilogram bioreactor at our toll manufacturing partner, Soltex, based in Belleville. We are based in Napanee, so Belleville's about a half-hour drive away, and they have been with us since we dreamed of this, basically. And they have the ability to scale, and they have the ability to expand into other geographic regions, mainly the US, because of sister facilities. And another point that I'd like to make is that our production, we are in active discussion about licensing this around the world because our Raw materials, it's probably cheaper to ship to source and not ship from here after we've made it. But there are a couple small quantity key ingredients that we could ship pre-mixed, sort of the Kentucky Fried Chicken secret recipe type of business model to keep our IP under control. So what is EcoGel? So on the left of the pictures, that's a picture of our concentrate. It is 75% Canadian grown ag products. It is a mixture of gums and starch in a vegetable oil carrier with a little bit of pixie dust for stabilization and flow characteristics. The jar in the middle is I believe, a 3% hydrogel. The fire service typically runs 1, 3, or 6%, and we can dial into any one of those standard percentages. So you take the concentrate, you mix it with water, you provide some mixing shear, and that could be nothing more than putting it down a fire hose, and you get this slime out the back end, which can be used for regular combustible fires, can be used for flammable solvents. We've had experience using it for lithium-ion battery fires, and so it's fairly widely applicable across a range of industries. On the right is a typical foam concentrate. And in this sense, the foams, which is the dominant fire suppressant on the market, are really nothing more than glorified dish soap. The problem is that they don't go into the the water treatment facilities. They go into the ground, taking all the toxic byproducts of combustion with them. So we think we've got an advantage there. So just to sort of summarize that again, foam's full of surfactants, varying levels of PFAS, which is why every military and airport in North America, around the world, is contaminated with PFAS. It solubilizes the toxic products of combustion, and quite often the firefighters are wading in the stuff. And so if it's got PFAS, if it's got the toxic products in it, they are getting exposed, and firefighter cancer is significantly higher than the general population. And firefighting is considered a class 1 carcinogen just because of what they're exposed to. So our goal as a company is to get rid of one of the potential causes for cancer in the fire service. As you can see, 400 million liters were used globally in 2022. So there is a sizable market that we are looking to disrupt. And speaking of disruption, there's a lot of places we can go with EcoGel. All of the founders were municipal fire department people. Some are currently still active. So that was where we started. That's where we got our proof of concept. And we have local fire departments that are still using our product and have been for 5 or 6 years. But tender cycles in the municipal space are very, very long. So we have gone other places. And so on this list, I'd say mining and actually rail. I didn't get it on here. Mining and rail have been 2 of our biggest customers to date. We have also got many customers in the waste and recycling sector. One company in particular I won't name, they were being threatened with jail time because of the leachate runoff as they were trying to put out their autofluff fires, and they've not been called to task since they've switched to our product, because our product will stick and stay and has no runoff essentially, and so we'll put out the fire and then it stays where it was placed. A lot of others here, I'll just let you read it. But what I want to want to say is that between Canada and the US so far, we've been okay because we are CUSMA compliant. We also have sales into the Middle East, into South America, and into Europe. Australia is in discussions, and other geographic regions. And we are also working with a partner for a novel way to do aerial drops as far as wildfire mitigation. It's on everybody's mind these days. And this technology partner is currently in 17 countries around the world. So we're almost there. What we need to do next, continue to optimize for other market sectors. I think I mentioned, dust control, Class K fires, they all need tweaks to the formula to make them optimal. The supply chain, 75% is from Canada, but the rest of it's from around the world, including the Middle East, China, Europe, the US. And so having multiple vendors to supply our products is important for redundancy and to buffer against the current US administration, to buffer against pandemics. We did a lot of our tech development during the pandemic. Expand our distribution network and potentially our production network worldwide. And something that maybe we can get into in the questions is the certifications are something that holds us back. So with that, that's me and Quincy, the president, contact details, and obviously Wayne. I didn't put you directly on the slide, Wayne, because that might be considered a conflict of interest. So Wayne has been our acting CEO for a number of years now. And with that, I will stop.
Great, fabulous. Thanks, David. Appreciate it very much. And hopefully there'll be lots of questions for our question period. Please use the chat so we can deal with those when the time comes. So let's move on now to Juha from Teleri. And Juha, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Okay, and thanks for having me. And can you see now my presentation in a full screen mode?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my name is Juha Hyvärinen, and I'm coming from a company named Teleri. And I have a master's degree in forestry, and now I am managing director of our Teleri Biocoal Canada Ltd, and that's based on Nova Scotia Halifax company. So we have a development company here in Canada, and my personal background is from forest industry and the biomass business from Finland, and I have a colleague here in Halifax, Pyry, and he's a finance and operations manager. So we have a two-man's team here in Halifax. And just to give an idea, what is Teleri? So the parent company. So Teleri is a Nordic capital investment company listed in Nasdaq Helsinki, and maybe the one number to give is the assets under management. We have a 2.7 billion euros, so it's around 4.3 billion Canadian dollars. And the business we have three different business segments. So first we have this Garantia, and it's a specialist credit risk insurance company. And then we have this the largest segment is the private asset management, and there the infrastructure wind is the largest business, or I would say the renewable energy, wind and solar, battery storage, that kind of businesses, and we are just fundraising. It's actually the largest infrastructure fund in Finland. It's over 500 million euros one fund, and that the fundraising is still going, and that fund is going to invest in renewable energy. And then we have this private equity and actually the bioindustry bioindustry company, bioindustry growth company, which is investing the development and production of bio-based materials on an industrial scale. So we are, example, Fintoil, it's a tall oil refinery in Finland. And then there is Enifer, it's a protein company building its first commercial scale fermentation factory to Finland. And then there is example, this our bioindustry team has managed the Joensuu biocoal factory, or the company what I will be present later in this presentation. And then we have basic like real estate investment and other investments. But the topic today is the biocoal and as we call it, biocoal at an industrial scale. So what we have done is and invested in Finland to Joensuu, city of Joensuu, is the first commercial scale biocoal factory in Finland, and it might be the largest one in present in Europe as well. So the production capacity is 60,000 metric tons annually, and the factory is an ramping up phase, and the next steps for us and why we are here in Canada is to scale up the technology here in Canada, where the raw material is available, and we have found that there is a lot of opportunities for this business is here in Canada. And I can say that we have pipeline of bunch of projects, mostly in Eastern Canada. And the first project is the feasibility study, pre-design study, and permitting roadmap is ready here in Nova Scotia, and we are looking for to have we are doing that investment decision next year, approximately Q3 next year. And for us, because Taaleri is a little bit different capital investment company. Usually, this kind of capital investment companies are offering only money or equity for the projects, but we are a little bit different. So we have team of different like foresters or engineers or so quite a large expertise in many ways. And so we have managed this whole project or company from scratch to this stage what it is now. And for the investment cases, I would say that we have to secure the raw material and place for the factory, and usually you have to have a 50% of the offtake of the capacity sold before the final investment decision. And for us, because we have done this once in Finland, we know how to build the factory and what is the capex costs, and we can have 70% of the capex costs fixed before the investment decision. And just the biocoal in brief, we use fresh wood chips. It can be like byproducts from sawmill industry, low-graded wood, mostly softwood, but we can use some hardwood as well. And the production is quite simple. First, we dry the wood chips, and then the dried wood chips goes to torrefaction reactor, and we can and we kind of roast the wood chips in reactor without oxygen, and then we can the yield what we can get on dry basis is 70 to 75% of the raw material, and we burn the gas which is released from the wood chips in torrefaction reactor, and with that energy we produce heat for the drying and torrefaction reactor, and it's kind of closed loop, so we don't need any energy, and we don't have any surplus energy from the process. And usually we would like to densify the material after the torrefaction, and we can in Finland we have briquetting machines, so we can do briquettes or we can do pellets as well. And there's some customer sector examples. So mostly torrefied biomass is used as energy or the fuel for producing energy, and most promising is and CHP and power plants in Europe, but also in Canada. One to mention is NP Power. You might know that project, and then cement industry, steel industry, and some niche industry examples like non-ferrous metal production, activated carbon, and so on. And picture tells more than 100 words. So this is Joensuu biocoal factory here in the front of the picture, the dark brown facility, and that's the torrefaction building, and in the right hand side there is the wood chip reception, belt dryer, and also screens for the raw material. So that's the 60,000 metric tons factory in Finland, in the middle of forests, and in left hand side you can see the chips what we are using as a raw material in Finland. And some pictures from inside the factory. We are using next fuel technology. We have exclusivity to use that here in Canada, and the manufacturer is Andritz. And here you can see the end product, briquettes. So it's at the size of the briquettes. It's easy to say here in Canada. It's size of the hockey puck or stack of the hockey pucks, and even longer ones can be produced.
Wrap up fairly soon. Sure, at the last slide. My apologies.
Yeah, 10 seconds.
Well-oiled machine.
Yeah, so that was the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Again, my apologies for interrupting, but yeah, some precision presenting there from both parties so far. So setting the tone for the next two. Next, any questions, again, please put them in the chat and we'll deal with that. We have a fair length of time after the presentations to deal with questions. I think it's a good opportunity to get a sense of these real world examples, let's call it. So next we have Tom Whitten of Green Graphite Technologies. And Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity today. Let me just get this in slideshow mode, and give me 2 seconds here. Hopefully you could see it and all could see it in slideshow mode. So if not, scream, but we're good to go. So Tom Whitten, I'm Vice President Project Development for Green Graphite. I've spent the last 20. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, but about 20 years ago, I made the leap over to the dark side of business development, but always in support of innovation as you move towards commercialization. And we're in that valley of death that was talked about in a previous panel, so I'll elaborate as to where we're at. So Green Graphite Technologies, Montreal-based, with operations in Kingston and soon in Mississauga, Ontario. We're powering lithium-ion batteries, and with the goal of securing a supply chain with a cost-effective graphite to serve the lithium-ion battery markets. We intend to be both an operator of our technology platform along as a technology licensor. Founded in 2021, we are a privately held Canadian company, and we have raised to date through both dilutive and non-dilutive, primarily non-dilutive sources, grants, $12 million per date. So little background on graphite, and I'll come back to this as it pertains to the market-driven examples that we're looking at this panel. There's 15 times more graphite in a lithium-ion battery than there is lithium. So there's a lot of graphite in there, about 40 to 45% of the battery. If there's no graphite, there's no EVs. The vast majority of that graphite comes from China. It's a market that's completely dominated by China, which has its own geopolitical challenges. This fits very well with the G7 countries looking to bring onshore supplies of critical minerals and not to have such an important control from one country. And so that's certainly we fit into that. On the graphite side of things, there is a projected over $5 million ton per annum supply gap by 2030. And so we're looking to leverage our know-how and our technologies to be able to move that forward. Graphite is not only used for making pencils or EVs, but also used in the defense industry for a number of constructions and applications. At the end of the day, securing graphite domestically, whether it's primary graphite, secondary graphite, it's a national security issue, whether it's in Canada, the US, or in the Western world. I'll come back to this at the end. So there are 3 steps in making battery grade graphite. You take either, we specialize in taking mined resources, or we're also looking to leverage recycled sources of graphite. There's 3 processing steps, and we specialize in the second step, which is called purification. Though we are looking to be an operator to do the shaping and micronizing upstream and downstream the coating with our partners who have an R&D facility in Hamilton called Rain Carbon, to be able to produce the coated spherical purified graphite that the battery cell gigafactories require to make anode active material. And also it'll be referred to as anode active material is also another term that's used in the industry. So our technology really is 2 steps. It's comprised of leaching with either an acid or an alkaline, combined with continuous carbochlorination, technology developed by the company we spun out from, which is Kingston Process Metallurgy. It is with that material that you're making the 99.95+% battery grade graphite, and certainly our value proposition around that is actually being able to do it at a 50% lower operating cost versus taking the incumbent hydrofluoric acid based technology and implementing it in North America. We also have a lower carbon footprint by 82% versus China produced anode active material, with a large reduction in water consumption and waste generation. We're patented, it's proven at the pilot scale, and we're now at the demonstration phase. So essentially where we're trying to insert ourselves into the market, certainly the drivers are, with that supply gap is in fact, EVs and batteries for EVs, as well as energy storage, and natural flake graphite, which is the source of graphite that can be mined. We have a supply agreement with a company called Weaver Energy they're out of Ontario, but they have a British Columbia mine, and they're looking to restart that mine. And we've been able to take the coated spherical purified graphite and demonstrate its performance versus reference material for both what they call the NMC and LFP type batteries. We're also looking at circular economies, being able to take recycled material, purify that, and turn that into upcycled graphite products, with the possibility of scrap from manufacturing facilities being able to, like production scrap from gigafactories, to be able to be reused for batteries. Our path to commercialization is as follows. We will be starting up in Mississauga, Ontario, Q1 2026, our 5 kilogram per hour carbochlorination furnace. We're really focused on the purification step. We will then be moving towards the full process from feedstock to coated spherical purified graphite, mostly under one roof, 50 kilogram per hour level, a 10-fold scale up in 2027. The goal, that step would then generate offtakes that would lead to our first commercial plant, a startup in 2029, and a ramp up eventually to 20 kilotons per annum of anode active material, with selling also graphite byproducts. It's definitely something that's on our radar. So we've raised, as mentioned at the beginning, $12 million to date, 9 million of which is non-dilutive. Our partners, including BIC. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, the whole team there at BIC, for your support. BDC, also very important shareholder. But a lot of the non-dilutive asset parts are from our partners that we see on the right side of this screen. We are in the middle of an equity raise. We're looking to raise 10 million Canadian dollars, $7 million US for the second phase of our demo. I meant, you know, to be able to get to the 2027 phase in order to expand the team, new IP, run the demo plant, and really get to the stage where we can then fund a commercial plant. Now, to come back to the subject matter, which we'll be able to discuss during our panel. I already showed you the opportunity. EVs are still growing despite, you know, some other situations that have occurred. There is still growth projected for EV sales, thus battery cells needed to operate electric vehicles. There are policy positions of the G7 countries, and certainly in the US, there are policies which support critical minerals and specifically graphite. And in the US, where most of the North American gigafactories are, there are important import tariffs that are being planned up to 160% due to practices of selling below cost. As such, there's a market opportunity for us. However, barriers to entry are certainly, we know that the incentives for the EV purchases have been diminished over time. Perhaps the timelines will be extended in North America. We know that the GMs and the Fords, they're all producing at a loss in terms of EVs for now, because they don't have necessarily secured onshore supply chain. Margins are always going to be small in automotive, so there's always going to be downward pressure on pricing and margins. And finally, probably, and this I heard a gentleman from GM responsible for supply chain and battery materials made a presentation a couple of weeks ago here in Quebec, and in his opinion, the biggest barrier to entry is actually CapEx, huge CapEx associated with building battery material plants. Basically, it's 4x how much it costs to build a plant in China. So when we're comparing capacities, apples to apples. So that's a huge challenge that we're having to face. These are the market conditions that we're looking to cross over from the valley of death. Just to name a few of our colleagues, I have to highlight Jillian Hallcroft, whom I'm stepping in for today. She's in Asia, meeting with battery cell manufacturers. So very, very happy to do that. And Kevin Watson, also co-founder and former KPM employee, part of the spinoff from KPM. Very experienced team, and we're looking to be commercial in 4 years, and lots of advantages about doing. Here's my contact information. I hope I'm look forward to the panel, the exchanges, and if you have any questions, there's my contact information on the screen. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Boy, we're moving along here. So it's I don't want to say it's a tough act to follow, Ron, in terms of timing of the presentation, but last but not least, of course, Ron Hoffman from Six Rings. So Ron, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. I'll just try to find my screen here.
Perfect. There we go.
Okay, there we go. And I'll just get the presentation mode.
You're in
I think it is now. We can.
Okay,
it looks
excellent,
like
perfect. So look, thanks everyone, and firstly, congrats to BIC and Lambton College for this timely and important gathering. We're delighted to be part of it, so thank you. In terms of my personal background, I work for a chemical company, but I'm neither a chemist nor an engineer, so I'm a real anomaly in the place. I'm actually a 35-year public servant. Over 26 years in our diplomatic service. I had the privilege of serving Canada as an ambassador to several countries. And why would I join a technology company like this at the end of a public service career? It's that Six Ring came out of an oil and gas chemicals company. The men and women and scientists that were part of the predecessor company were hardcore oil and gas experts. But we developed a technology that is suddenly applicable to forestry, aviation, transport, marine, pharmaceuticals, food processing, and many other things. And the technology is highly kind of aligned with not only Canadian government policy, but government policies and multilateral policies globally. So they brought me in to kind of build those partnerships around the commercialization of this technology. Had we not had a funding source from our predecessor company, we would never have come this far had we been counting on non-dilutive government grants. We've spent about $25 million over 6 years developing the six-ring platform. We were the science arm of Fluid Energy Group, which is a larger company that we sold a couple of years ago. The revenues of that company helped fund Six Rings development. And then when we sold Fluid Energy, that shareholders gave a pool of money to help capitalize the ongoing research. So we're only now at the stage of raising some serious capital, but we were able to do this mostly on our own. We did get between 10 and 15% of government grants in more recent years. I see Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has a number of people on this call. AEFC was one of the early bodies that invested some money into us, and it gave us a really big boost at a critical time. And then we had little smaller amounts from Alberta Innovates, IRAP, and so forth. But that little bit of government money helped enormously. But had we not had significant private sector money, we never would have come to this point. So what does that mean, being part of this point? The team at Six Ring basically looked at society and particularly at the clean fuels space. And we saw a couple challenges that seemed to dominate. One, so many biofuels facilities have been rather struggling, or they failed around the world. And we kind of looked at the reasons why that was the case. And there was, we concluded that the technologies that they were using tended to be very high energy. The feedstocks were very narrow that they counted on, either a single feedstock or a very narrow range of feedstocks. And they produced a very narrow range of products, and in some cases only one product. And we thought there were probably some solutions to get around that using chemistry. But the other observation we had is that most of the biofuel facilities around the world that were operating or tried to operate were dependent on carbon credits, ongoing government subsidies. They basically were not competitive with fossil fuels. And we thought, if this industry is ever going to scale in a significant way and make a dent in emissions reduction, it has to be able to compete with fossil fuels on its own. And that's where we get into the market opportunities that we think Six Ring brings to bear. And I'll just flip through some of this. Oops. I'm going to jump straight to this slide. So, and again, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a biologist, but it's clear, I think, that anybody that looks at non-food biomass, lignocellulosic biomass, all of the three constituent parts, the lignin, cellulose, and hemicellulose, have valuable molecules. The challenge with most legacy technologies is that the lignin is just very, very hard to process. So most legacy technologies use high heat or high pressure to basically destroy or burn the lignin, leaving very few of the constituent parts of lignocellulosic biomass that can be developed into high-value products. The Six Ring process doesn't use any thermal processes, doesn't use heat, doesn't use pressure. It operates at ambient temperature. So 90% of the constituent parts of any lignocellulosic biomass that we're using is converted into valuable materials. And that gives us a number of distinct advantages. Our capex is much lower because we don't have heat. The engineering is simpler. The chemicals we use are not exotic chemicals. We use base chemicals and an organic catalyst where we modify the acids. It's a fast process that takes about 6 hours from beginning to end. And we don't need any pre-treatment of the feedstock. We don't have to dry it. We don't have to do anything to it except size it. It can be wet because we have water in our core process. So if it's wet or dry, we just add and change the proportion of water that we use. We can produce a very wide range of products. Like a barrel of oil, we can convert or advance the chemistry to produce dozens of high-value products. What we're focusing on is a very small range so we can get to market earlier. The fuels we produce do not require refining, and that's a critical step to allow it to go faster, cheaper to get to market. We don't have any feedstock dependencies. We can basically use hundreds of varieties of lignocellulosic feedstock. From Canada, it would be wood residues, straws, waste wood from landfills, and around the world, there are massive amounts of aggregated biomass from sugar facilities, palm oil manufacturing, coconut manufacturing, rice husks, rice straws. Many of the industries globally have very large amounts of available feedstock that doesn't have to be aggregated, doesn't have to add an extra cost or an extra challenge to the carbon index because they're already there. And while some of the material is burned for power, just like in the forestry sector in Canada, in many cases the amount of materials is excess to even those power needs. Fill it back here. We already covered that. So I'm just going to touch upon this for a moment. Since we sort of went public and discussing what Six Ring is and what we were trying to do, we're continually asked whether we can support sustainable aviation fuel development, given the challenges in the market, the high cost, the limited availability. While Six Ring has developed a very high yield cellulosic ethanol process, I think one of the first in the world that could do this at relatively low cost and at high yield. The alcohol to jet SAF process is still relatively new, it's expensive. So moving ethanol product into jet fuel, sustainable jet fuel is still at its infancy. So 85 to 90% of the world uses the HEFA process, which are lipids, oil seeds, etc., used cooking oil. But those input costs have risen dramatically. There's a shortage of materials. It's very hard to scale with the limited feedstock that are available. So our scientists have now developed a process where we can take a mix of our liquid crude from the lignin and hemicellulose and a proportion of our very highly structured cellulose, and through established processes, basically reproduce the precursor molecules that go into the HEFA process. So this is our area of concentration now. We're probably at TRL 5 or so for this, but this is our area where we're confident in the next year or two we're going to be able to bring this to market and significantly scale the ability of world industry using established processes to be able to produce significantly more amounts of sustainable aviation fuel. As I mentioned before, while the lignocellulosic materials that we produce through our crude oil pathway and our cellulose pathway can produce a wide range of valuable materials, what we're focusing on in the short term to get to market is from the biocrude, a diesel, basically something equivalent to a renewable diesel, but second generation from non-food, and that doesn't require a cracking process, so it's got certain ecological advantages. This diesel fuel can go straight into tanks right now. A part of the heavy fraction crude will be used as a corrosion inhibitor, and our very highly structured cellulose stream would go into either cellulosic ethanol or as a supplement for anaerobic digesters to significantly boost biomethane production. We've tested this in field conditions. We have consistent high results. We're now marketing offtake of this from the initial plants that are going to come together. So these will be the initial commercially accessible pathways, none of which require ongoing subsidies or carbon credits, and some jurisdictions will be eligible for them, and that will help, but it's not dependent on that, which is why we're why we're in licensing discussions in about 10 jurisdictions globally, including jurisdictions that don't have credit regimes.
Well, if we could just get you to wrap up, it'd be great. We're a little over 10 minutes.
Okay, so we're already operating basically at commercial scale in Calgary. This is our test facility. We're raising 80 million Canadian to purchase a biodiesel facility that will be our first commercial demonstration facility in Alberta, and we're in licensing discussions globally. I'll just leave it at that, and sorry if I've gone over a little bit.
No problem. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Great. Well, we thank you to all four of our presenters. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. We have a few questions here, and let me just scroll down through our question period. And all right. So the first question, excuse me, is for I guess for David, and some comments. The question was, what opportunities are there to get certifications to reduce barriers to adoption, despite the health benefits of changing? So, David, I'll flip that over to you.
Okay. How long do we have?
Well, you and I both know it's a lengthy discussion.
The certification, there's the sort of upstream certifications for the raw materials, which I covered partially in my presentation. What we meet is, oh, you don't have the U.S. Department of Agriculture Qualified Products List designation. We're not going to look at you. And this has come from probably half the provinces in the country. That said, the QPL is on hold right now because of the current U.S. administration, and our intellectual property office advisors have said that's our greatest likelihood of losing our IP. So it's a double-edged sword on that. So that would get us into perhaps the wildfire market a little bit faster. That said, I did mention that we have a sort of workaround, which is to use, all the military cargo planes and military helicopters in the world and fill our product into cardboard boxes and drop them out of the back of the planes, as opposed to trying to pump it directly from the the red retardant bombers that everybody sees that are filled with the Perimeter Solutions FOSCHEK products. So if you can't if you can't fight them, do a workaround, and that's what we've done on that front. One of the other issues, and it's certification sort of, a lot of jurisdictions go, well, keep an eye on the tendering process, for the province or for municipalities or even the feds. The issue there is they all ask for foams. And as I said, we're not a foam, we're a gel. So the education piece there to get them to ask for water additives and not foams is huge. One of the things that we have done, and I just want to tout our own horn for a little bit here, we were successful in the Innovation Solutions Canada program, which was a year and a half working with the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Navy. And we now have a designation with the Pathway to Procurement or Pathway to Commercialization program. So that allows us many millions of dollars worth of untendered procurement with departments, federal departments that are interested. So in some ways, we're trying to do as many workarounds as we can while we look to see what certifications really make sense. And to my point in the slide, that RU designation was efficacy, not characteristics. So we're not a foam, so we don't make bubbles, so the bubbles don't collapse, so we would never get a certification. So we're also looking at developing certifications with CSA or UL or whoever to address our disruptive nature of our product. And I know that was a long answer to the question.
Great, thanks. Thanks, David. Another question for the whole panel, and question is, what is the biggest hurdle you faced in overcoming the valley of death? Talent, pre-seed investment, market traction, other. Ron, given that you're public, maybe not all of those apply, but why don't we start with you?
So we're not public. We're still private
Oh, sorry.
private corporation. So although we may be public someday. Look, I mean, the biggest, I mean, there's a series of interrelated challenges. Financing is key. We've been at the capital raise process for a couple of years to purchase this biodiesel facility. But there are multiple challenges that play out at the same time, and the financing is linked to offtake. Offtake is linked to companies that are willing to take a risk on some new products. We are dealing with legacy businesses, either refineries or fuel companies, larger players that need to integrate product into their product mix. And large companies are very kind of risk averse. They're slow, especially right now. They're focused on shareholder value and not putting a lot of emphasis on innovation and related to kind of bioindustrial products or fuels in general. It's hard to get products off the ground, and we need some kind of corporate partners to take some risks in being able to say, I'm actually gonna do an offtake agreement on this product, assuming it meets certain specifications. And that is something we're still working on. We're getting there, but it's a long process. I mean, to be doing what we're doing for 6 years now with a team of 35 to 40 personnel, half of which are scientists, because this is a very complex space. We would not have survived had we not had some fairly deep pockets of our own. We're reaching kind of the end of that process and are now confident that we've got some advanced offtake discussions. But it's a tough road, and I can see why many casualty technologies wouldn't be able to get this far.
Thanks, Rod. Tom, I'm going to put this to you, and I'm going to ask you last, because obviously you're part of a well-financed parent company. That doesn't mean you don't have challenges. So I suspect your challenges are probably a little different. But maybe we could move on to Tom and then David. And having been involved or being involved with both those companies, I know the challenges, but I'd like to hear it from them. So Tom, you first, please.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I think there's ultimately in the battery space. I think part of the challenge is that each battery cell manufacturer has their own formulation. They have their own different requirements, their different impurity specs, and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing. There isn't like an ASTM standard or something that we need to build to. We're as we move through our technology readiness level process, we're hitting a bit of a moving target, but I mean, we know what the challenge is. But I think the biggest challenge, I think, any time a company's moving to market, it's this chicken or the egg scenario. In our case, we need to be able to produce enough material to initiate a qualification process from these battery cell manufacturers. We've had nice engagement, but to have material customer engagement, which is what the investment community wants and requires for us to then finance and move forward from our TRL 6, 7 level up to the 8, 9 levels. You need that material customer engagement, and so that's once we're at that first demo stage, we will be able to make an appreciable amount of material to be able to then initiate those material engagements. But in the meantime, the challenge is, how do we get there? And so, I mean, part of my mandate within GGT is to actually look for other markets for our graphite, and not only that, establish revenue generation opportunities between now until we're selling coated spherical purified graphite to battery cell manufacturers. And so that it's we're on that. I mean, we're in that valley of death. We're not on the other side of the valley of death yet. So I'd love to be in that position. But that's really the what I think one of the main challenges that we're faced with right now.
Great, David. Quick response on this one.
Yeah, so we are certainly still in the valley of death. We had the ULRU in 2022, and things have taken off commercially since then. We had about $1 million in sales in 2024, but that's not enough to feed the beast at this point. So there's still need for venture capital. We're always in a raise of some level or another. Other things that play into our space is the fire service. I couldn't believe it when I started, but it really is the Wild West. We've had on websites, companies claiming they could put out volcanoes. So that's the level of, snake oil that is out in this industry. So that for a company like us that's trying to do it, scientifically, ethically, that has been a barrier. We're also playing in a very long established, fire and fire suppression have been around since the beginning of time, probably beginning of civilization. So it is a long established industry. And so disrupting something that's as entrenched as it is has been certainly an issue. And related to that is, where do we focus? Because fire suppression touches on everything that was on that one slide of mine and many more things. So as I said, the founders were municipal fire people. So okay, let's start there. But it's not a market that will grow fast. And so switching the messaging, switching the ability to address the needs of different markets with a very small team, it has been certainly a challenge. And in our space, there's lots of history of people getting bought out and the technology buried. And the last thing, given that we're 13 years into this, is to want our technology buried. So finding partners that are complementary, if they sell hardware and we sell the stuff that goes in the hardware, the printer and the print ink type business model, that is good, but that takes work as well. So maybe I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, David. Yoav, perhaps you're coming from a very different space here in terms of developing it. Perhaps maybe some comments on trying to establish operations in Canada.
Yeah, I would say the offtake agreement. So it's in Finland. It was I can say the financing wasn't problem for us because we are a capital investment company and Thaler is one anchor investor in Finland. But we scale up. Actually, the technology owner, they have a demo plant in Austria. It's 1 ton per hour, and our reactor is 8 tons per hour. So I would say that the commercialization and commissioning phase we are still kind of this death valley still, because when all the equipments are in place, everybody wants the factory up and running like right away. But usually that stage can take like 1 year or year and a half. So that's really hard with new technology and ramping up the production. So that's one hurdle. But if I take one point, scaling up business here in Canada. So we would like to double the size of the factory with 2 reactors. So for the investment case here, the biggest hurdle is to have offtake agreements. So it's a chicken and egg situation with investors, lenders, so and off-takers. So we need to have at least 50% of the capacity sold before the investment decision, and our customers like energy companies, they don't want to do off-take agreements before they can rely that we can create that kind of supply. So that's the biggest hurdle. But for us, the advance is that we have the first commercial scale plant now in Finland, and I hope that it's going to be in a production phase in next year, and then we can go over those hurdles.
Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to jump around a couple of the questions here, but here's a question for both Ron and Juha. And the question is, have you ever tried producing products for downstream bio-based industries, such as the tire industry, asphalt industry, or the hydrogen industry? And can these downstream projects add value to your company? So Ron, perhaps.
So we we produce inputs for other industries, right? Whether it's the cellulosic ethanol to upgrade into SAF, for example, or our heifer precursors that we're working on. Our cellulose goes into the RNG industry as an input. So we produce a lot of intermediate products. What we don't produce is products for some industries, but our fuels can be mixed as well. Our diesel fuel, for example, or our diesel additive would go into refineries that are producing diesel and would serve as a lubricity additive. And then once we move up the value chain in our sort of pyramid of high value products, our biochemicals, MCC, NCC, and so forth can go into a wide range of industries. But I was just thinking back to your earlier question, Wayne. One of our challenges is actually that Canada is a very high cost jurisdiction, and we have many more advancing discussions outside of Canada than we have in Canada, and that's where there's a good possibility that our technology is going to be active elsewhere and less active in jurisdictions like Alberta. We're hoping our first commercial demonstration facility will be here, a $55 million global showcase for the technology, but it's also quite possible that we're going to be moving this technology to Thailand or Malaysia, UAE, and other places.
Okay, thanks. Juha, perhaps some comments from you.
Yes, so we have ongoing discussions with like a SAF companies or producers, and they are interested. It's like our product is like a solution for the logistics problem for that kind of, or like if you have a refinery in Rotterdam, so there's no forest or wood available around there, so the fiber basket might be here in Canada, and one way to have a more efficient logistic chain to that factory, SAF factories, is to torrefied material where you can find it like in Canada, and then transport that torrefied material to SAF plant in Europe, example, and our product can be raw material for biographite or something like that. So I think with two-phase manufacturing biographite, so it might be good to torrefy biomass before you are producing biographite from wood. So these kind of comments from my side.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time, so maybe some quick answers to one other question. There's also other questions in the chat. There's one for you, Ron. You may just want to respond to that one. Here's the question for the panel as a whole, and these maybe give very brief comments. Have you leveraged academia, universities, and colleges to propel your company forward and defray costs associated with validating your technology? So, David, let's go down the list. We'll start with you. Just a quick response.
The definite answer is yes. When I first met FireRain, I was with the Industry Partnerships Office at Queen's University and introduced FireRain to Green Centre Canada, now I forget whatever they're called now, who did the validation. And since then, we've worked with Lambton, St. Lawrence College, Seneca, Loyalist. We have 4 published toxicology papers with the University of Guelph. The Innovation Solutions Canada project was done, half of it was done with the University of Waterloo. So being an academic, a former academic myself, I very much understand that value chain and have tapped into it as much as possible.
Great, thank you. Juha?
Shortly, not yet, but we are interested in the future.
Okay, great. Tom?
Yeah, I probably, the answer is a resounding yes. Probably our closest collaborators right now at the academia level would be INRS out of Quebec. We've worked together on several projects. I mean, they're not the only ones that we've worked with. I do want to make one recommendation for everyone. I'm a firm believer in the college level support, because very often the type of support you can get is, so Lambton College, perfect example here, and others. In Quebec, it would be the collegial technology transfer centers. great opportunity for not only for getting some services to help moving down the R&D scale, but at the same time also cultivating your future labor market. So that's just wanted to throw that in there.
Great, thanks. And Ron, last to you.
We're so lucky in Canada to have such a strong post-secondary ecosystem that companies can rely on. I don't think Six Ring has actually leveraged that process as well as we should. We have used the MyTax program, working with University of Western Ontario, UVic on the island on certain things. We've paid for services of universities where they've got lab equipment that we don't have, and we've talked to them about deepening research going forward. Once we're a going concern and we have revenue coming in from our licensing or the facilities that we own, we do plan on doing much more joint research. One of the challenges with some of our major post-secondaries is that we're an IP company. We're ultimately always going to be a technology company, and we want to own our IP. And we've had some discussions where we've just haven't been able to move forward joint research because of the ownership of the IP issue. And going back to Tom's comment, I think what we haven't leveraged sufficiently is the college system. And even in Alberta, we have the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. They've got fabulous capabilities that I think we haven't leveraged enough, and that's something that we're trying to do going forward. We are going to deepen relations with post-secondaries for sure, particularly when we're in a stage when we're more willing to do co-ownership of IP, for example. And the colleges don't tend to have that same policy or that same requirement. They tend to be much more flexible in terms of companies owning the IP. So it's a range of possibilities, and I think companies starting out should certainly understand that system well as they look for opportunities to leverage them.
Great. Thank you, Ron, and thank you to everybody on the panel today. Been a great session. And I will turn it over to I guess we're at a break, but I'll turn it over to Megan at this point.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. Very much appreciated all of your examples, comments, and insights. And thanks for bringing up our academic institutions. We do this program every year in partnership with Lambton College. And they are a great partner to have at the table. So as Wayne mentioned, we're going to take a bio break for 15 minutes. I put up the agenda. You can see that we'll be back in just less than 15 minutes. If you don't mind, you don't need to log off. Feel free to turn your cameras off and mute yourselves. We'll come back for the last panel, and then we'll do some larger Q&A for anyone who's got questions across all three panels. All right, so we'll see you in 15 minutes. Please don't feel like you need to log off. If you do, feel free to log right back in. We'll see you in 15 minutes.
Hi, Megan.
I can hear you.
There we go.
Do you want to test your camera?
Yeah, the camera's there. So how do I do a share? Oh, here we are. Share. There we are. Only meeting organizers, presenters can share. So it's not allowing me to share.
Okay. Let me ask Preeti to see if she can't let you as an organizer.
All right.
Preeti, if you're on, can you set up Greg or provide him with permission to share his screen?
I don't know. I see Pretty's on, but her mic is muted, so I don't know if she walked away. I'm just going to see if I can do it from my end.
Oh, keyboard battery's very low. Great.
Greg, I think I did it.
What was that?
I think I was able to make you a presenter.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I see it now. Okay, let me try that. Share. Yep. Share. Screen, window, or tab. Let's try. Well, I guess I click that. Allow. Window. There we are. Which one? This one here. Do I need to put it in presentation mode first?
You can, it doesn't matter. You can do it either way. We're not seeing anything yet. Are you using two monitors?
Yeah.
Oh,
Slide it over. It says I'm sharing.
I'm not seeing anything.
Let me try.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi, I have it if we need me to share it as well.
TeamMicrosoft.com is sharing a window, which is me. And I have the option to stop sharing.
Do you want me to share the link again?
Do you see it now, Megan?
No. Andrea's got your presentation, so we can share it.
But
oh, okay. Well, can you resend it? It'll only take a second.
Okay.
I'm happy to share it if as long as you can see it when I share it and walk through it.
Let's see if I get out of here now. Escape that.
Are you still in Europe or are you back home?
No, I'm back. Getting things sorted out. Which one did I delete here? Oh, that seems right. No, delete that. Delete this one.
Greg, can you reshare your presentation, and then I'm happy to.
I just had
put
to
it
make
up.
adjustments.
Okay. Well, we can start with Andrea, and if you can send yours along in the next 10 minutes.
Send it to
send
who?
it to myself and Andrea.
As an email?
Yeah.
Attachment to, oh, why did that come up? All right, that's going to be on its way here. I'm going to go in a different way.
As long as you send it along, we'll get Andrea to kick us off.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I think that's part of the problem.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We've got one more panel and some Q&A, but we're glad to have you back. So our last panel today is building resilience in Canadian manufacturing, and this to us as organizers was an important panel because we really wanted to talk about strengthening our domestic supply chains, how to increase resiliency across our foundational sectors, how we're going to leverage Canada's assets for investment attraction, and then the ability to actually keep IP here and build these companies here. So I would like, we've got 3 speakers. We've got Andrea Kent from Greenfield Global, we've got Greg Maloney from BioApplied, and we've got Alex Billick from Silvacom. Each of them are going to talk a little bit about building resilience, but we'll start off with Andrea Kent, who is going to do a presentation focused on improving trade relations and policies both in and outside of Canada. So if I can ask Andrea to kick us off. Great. I see your screen. Awesome. Go ahead, Andrea.
Off to a good start there. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to present today. Looking at the topic, I mean, I don't know if there could be much more of a topical and relevant conversation to be having, and compliments and thanks to the organizers, absolutely, for putting it on the agenda today. For those who don't have much of a background in greenfield and kind of renewable fuels, I'll just give a little bit of an overview. And Megan, if you wouldn't mind, do you see the full screen here that I'm in, or is it obstructed?
Yes. No,
okay.
It's good. Yeah.
Fantastic. So Greenfield Global is a diversified specialty alcohol and fuel ethanol producer. We have production facilities in Canada as well as packaging facilities in the United States and in Ireland. We've been around for about 30 years, and just looking at some of the ways that maybe Greenfield can contribute from a little bit of a use case perspective. And also just some of the things that are really on our radar and things that we are driving towards when it comes to building in that resiliency, and really ensuring, I think, like that growth-oriented production focus that Megan highlighted at the onset here. I kind of like to start with a little bit of key takeaways from the beginning, just to kind of center the conversation a little bit, but also to hold me accountable if any of these things do not become evidently clear by the end of this short presentation. But really looking at some volatility scenarios, I think we're definitely in one right now, but you know, that's not to say that that's the first time that we've faced some shifts in political priorities, some shifts in economic outlooks, and some shifts in terms of kind of geopolitical trends and pushes and pulls. So looking at how that volatility can create opportunities. One of the diversification strategies that we have is actually carbon intensity, and looking at how carbon intensity can kind of determine competitiveness and where some markets are moving and shifting. Looking at really helping policymakers, investors, public office holders, and regulators really understand that biomanufacturing is a superpower. It really does strengthen economic resilience from an industry sectoral perspective, but also the broader kind of Canadian economy. And then looking at how do we really make the most of leveraging natural resources and making sure that policy continues to support domestic production and enhance market access and competitiveness. Looking at kind of why I think Greenfield has been able to maintain that perspective and really grow from a market diversification perspective really comes down to our vision, mission, and kind of core principles. So looking at Greenfield, we are very much centered on partnerships and looking at how we can accelerate sustainable solutions. A lot of our business is probably most well known for fuel ethanol, but we also, through partnerships, have made some sizable gains in diversifying our products and our processes, both from a carbon intensity perspective, as well as kind of future-proofing for growing markets. I know sustainable aviation fuel has been mentioned already, and looking at renewable natural gas, looking at also green methanol for marine. These are all sorts of capital projects that we have had on our books for quite a long time, and continue to look at investing and accelerating, as well as some smaller things that can happen at the plant and production level that are able to enhance both resiliency, but also allow us to penetrate and compete both more in domestic markets due to carbon intensity, as well as global markets and the programs that they are putting in place for biomanufacturing, biofuels, and other things. I put a bit of a timeline here just to kind of show, ironically, it's a linear timeline as I tell you that these sorts of evolutions and pivots aren't necessarily linear. But I thought it might be interesting looking at biomanufacturing from this perspective, just to kind of see where we started in 1989 and kind of where it is that we are today and where we're headed. As I mentioned, Greenfield has, kind of started and grown based on a partnership model, and looking at our beginnings as just a startup at a distillery in Ontario, a really failed attempt at an early biofuel, which was actually using artichokes as a feedstock. It was not a success by any measure, but it did lead us into distilling and fuel ethanol from corn. Around 2007 to 2014, this is when you see a lot of our fuel ethanol business start to really develop and expand, looking at both fuel ethanol as a product, as well as looking at it as a platform. We have partnerships in Quebec for anaerobic digestion, which offtakes municipal solid waste, turns it into renewable natural gas. That's both for sale as well as for putting back into our ethanol facility to reduce the reliance on fossil fuel inputs and reducing the carbon footprint and the carbon intensity of that plant. Looking at other things that we have done, we've expanded a strategy for imports and exports, as well as looked at platforms, as I mentioned, for sustainable aviation fuel and for green marine fuel. looking at that timeline and kind of what the transitions look like from a plant and from a facility perspective, this just gives you an idea looking at one of our facilities in terms of what it looks like from a product perspective. So when you look back at, circa 2008, it's pretty cut and dry. You're looking at fuel ethanol, and then one of the byproducts from fuel ethanol production is an animal feed product that's referred to as dried distillers grains that goes back into the animal feed market. It's a pretty high value product in addition to the fuel ethanol. It is important, kind of to note as well, just, from the startup period of around 2008, there were some support programs and some incentive programs, including a time-limited subsidy that helped this industry really kind of take off and helped fuel ethanol production. Those have all sunsetted. So what we're looking at now today is an unsubsidized industry. It's still a fuel ethanol industry, but look at all of the other amazing products that we have been able to take off of this platform. So we still have ethanol. This is a lower carbon intensity ethanol than even it was in 2008. We have high quality alcohol production. We still have dried distillers grains. We have corn oil, which goes in as an input. That's a feedstock for the renewable diesel business. We have biogenic carbon dioxide. We have renewable natural gas, as mentioned, with some of our anaerobic digestive partnerships and technologies. And we have continually reinvested into our own proprietary technology for sustainable aviation fuel, which would be coming off of the ethanol platform as well, too. So, when people kind of talk to me about resilience, I kind of like to look at this manufacturing and biomanufacturing story. It's really easy to kind of point to this. Not only did we, take this, as from a plant perspective, from, a pretty simple, highly efficient, but pretty simple platform for fuel ethanol and an animal feed byproduct into something that is much more diversified and much more valuable, both from a market penetration, but also from a risk mitigation standpoint and a market development standpoint. But very importantly, this was a $100 million investment that we actually made peak 2020 during the pandemic. So, when we kind of talk about resilience and we kind of look at the horizon right now and all of the political shifts and kind of the give and take in terms of where some capital programs and some support programs for renewable fuels and other biomass-based technologies and investments, it is possible to risk mitigate through these periods and kind of cross the chasm if you are diversified and if you are able to kind of anchor onto something more reliable. So a lot of these capital investments, mostly from our company's own kind of reinvestment cycle that we have, we're a private company, we're able to make because we were moving into a more diversified project portfolio, and also because, looking at the Canadian market certainly was one, but we also were able to look at some of the other programs and opportunities in other markets, including Europe. So that's what it kind of looks like from a product and facility perspective. This is kind of just a little bit of an overview to share our perspective on why it really, really matters from a business perspective and from an investment perspective. So again, uncertainty, whether it's trade uncertainty, whether it's kind of capital constraint, these factors have unfortunately always existed. Don't need to tell the people on this forum that. But the pace of change, I think it's safe to say that it is now accelerating. So when you're looking at the business case for diversification and you're looking at kind of the business case for continued decarbonization to keep pace, not just kind of with some of Canada's and some of the businesses' ambitions here, but also looking at where customers are going, looking at where other markets internationally are going, these sorts of things can really affect both competition on price as well well as, just market access across other jurisdictions. That might be the difference between a federal program or a provincial state level program. That might be the difference between programs on the same continent. That might be the difference of programs, globally around the world. But here are some of the fundamentals that we found very, very helpful in kind of building that book of business and investment. Number one, it's kind of remember to be counter-cyclical. That's okay. Different policy cycles are going to bring different opportunities. They're going to bring different challenges. But when fluctuations happen, one jurisdiction can provide opportunities and stabilities when others kind of falter. We see this happen in the US quite a bit when the administration fluctuates between, maybe a Republican energy agenda versus a more democratic environmental agenda. You will see a lot of states kind of amplify and accelerate their efforts. I think to some extent you see that in Canada right now with provincial low carbon fuel standards and content requirements in British Columbia and in Ontario, given a lot of the political instability around the clean fuels regulations over the past 18 months. Diversification. So, similar to the policy argument, when you just kind of look at, market demand signals and market pull, when that fluctuates, another market may open up and provide more stability. So when you look at sustainability certified products, those programs take time. I know a colleague, mentioned one earlier. The one that I have in mind right now is the ISCC program in Europe. That really can take, 18 months to 2 years to go through. So the sooner that we're able to kind of start planning for that in advance, the better. Even, Environment Climate Change Canada's ECCC model, that service standard can be around a year. And then why you do all this is for future proofing as well too, right? So again, for us, an ethanol production isn't just for ethanol today, it's for lower carbon fuels for the future as well too. So whether that, continues to be fuel ethanol for on-road or other modes. I think, one of the trends that we're definitely seeing, last year, it started, I think, from the biofuel sector with the Farms and Fuels Alliance. We've seen it from the Prime Minister himself, really talking about rural growth. And I think that's going to be a path forward for a lot of opportunities in biomass-based manufacturing and biomass-based fuels and renewable energies as well, too. So, looking at really making sure that the rural economic resilience is well understood and fully leveraged, not just because we want to address and prevent further trade deficiencies where a Canadian grower has to grow and then export into markets for renewables or other biomass-based projects in other jurisdictions. But we also want to make sure that the full value for domestic production is realized so that the economic benefits that come with domestic production are really well recognized. So, others have kind of given their list for policy needs. What we think is most beneficial is looking at longer term policies. So, let's look at a 10-year horizon, not just for GHG emissions, but for some of these funds and some of these opportunities. Looking at not just decarbonization technologies, but decarbonization infrastructure. Infrastructure seems to drop from a lot of these funds and from a lot of the longer term planning. Making sure that trade facilitation for certified products doesn't kind of get washed away with politics. Like these things are important frameworks and they should be able to provide investment certainty and help correct market distortions for investors and producers and growers, not exacerbate them. And then really, the recognition that rural manufacturing is a national strength that we should be proud of, not just out west necessarily, but also looking at corn in Ontario and Quebec, and then other biomass opportunities in the east as well too. So I'll wrap there, Megan. Hopefully that kind of fits the bill for what this panel had in mind and sets up the other speakers really nicely to continue on.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much, Andrea. Next up, I'm going to welcome Greg Maloney to the deck. And I've got his presentation, so I'm going to share his presentation so that we don't run into technical difficulties. But Greg, if you're there, if you could chime in.
I am. Thanks
Awesome.
so
Okay.
much, Megan, and to the event organizers from both BIC and Lambton College. I'm delighted to be here, although I have been somewhat reluctant to do so because I'm really not sure I have the answers for the subject at hand. But I was assured that I do have perspectives and that people would be willing to hear my perspective. So I'm delighted to share what I can. I'm going to start with a kind of a high level perspective on a lot of the headwinds we face currently. It's probably detectable on screen as well as if you meet me live, but I am a child of the 60s, so we go way back. One of my first memories is kindergarten when all the adults were upset because the president of the United States had just been assassinated. So it's a point in time that stands out. There was further assassinations, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and several more. So there's a lot of political violence going on at the time. The Vietnam War was raging. The National Guard was deployed, as some of you may recall as well. And there were 4 dead in Ohio where the National Guard shot protesters at Kent State University. It wasn't all bleak. We had color TV, which was quite new at the time and came into our household. Mini skirts became the fashion in the late 60s. Expo 67, as some of you might know about, was here in Montreal celebrating Canada's 100th anniversary or birthday. The Maple Leafs won their last Stanley Cup. There was a program I watched called Here Come the 70s. It was a focus on, hey, where are we going? We're polluting everything, our land, our water, our skies. And it kind of got me on track to be aware of it. Then we ran into the 70s and we had an oil crisis. The oil crisis was that we were running out of oil. There would not be enough oil to satisfy the world demand. That gave rise to the Japanese auto imports, the rust bucket Datsun that came in. And although it got a rocky start, the auto industry in the US started to change, and the appearance of cars went from the big lanyards to a much different model that we see today. We then had hyperinflation, so much so that the Canadian government, if you can believe it, brought in a thing called wage and price controls, where they were actually controlling the price in the marketplace and the price of people's wages. Things were that in desperate shape from an economic perspective. Iran took US hostages, Canada freed them. We had 18% plus interest rates. There's a hole in the ozone layer. There's acid rain. At the time, we had 16 manufacturing locations in Canada producing home appliances, washers, dryers, refrigerators, stoves, cooktops, and the like. Then we had When Irish Eyes Were Smiling, the bromance between Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney. We had a Canada-US free trade agreement to wipe out tariffs. And we also wiped out 16 manufacturing locations for home appliances in Canada. We then went and had cell phones. Then SUVs are back in the 80s. Good times are rolling. The internet showed its face. And we started to understand what a browser was and what the internet was. Smartphones were invented. Stock markets boomed and busted. The Y2K was an impending threat. The dot-com bubble burst. We had the subprime financial crisis and the climate crisis, and it goes on and on. I guess, you know, what I see is that we have a flourishing economy in the 60s, gives rise to environmental concerns. Environmental concerns then become displaced by economic concerns, and we repeat over that course of the last 50 years. I've seen it come and go a couple of times. Political tides change, focus and agenda changes. There's this constant ebb and flow. So how does this relate to resiliency? As much as I am personally concerned with today's geopolitical situation, we have been through it before. And through it all, companies have learned to thrive or die. And it's typically those companies that continue to invest in innovation that thrive. McKinsey recently wrote that technology leaders are business leaders. And I think that holds today as it did to some degree back then as well. So that's my high-level perspective. Get that out of the way. I will focus now more on the task at hand. I'll give a few perspectives of BioApplied over the last 14 years, and really a lot of the primary key learnings from supporting different companies and their investments to bring new bioproducts to market and materials to market. And companies that are deploying new technologies that enable some of these product supply chains to be cost effective. So I hope to distill all this into a few key lessons and observations. To many of you, it's going to seem very basic and fundamental, but sometimes the coach just has to break it down into the fundamentals for a player or a team to really reset and re-collaborate. So in terms of BioApplied, it's a boutique consulting company. Rod and I formed it back in the early 2010, 2011. What I'm showing on the screen here are really some notable organizations. On the left, Celluforce and Performance Biofilments, who many of you would recognize, and really in the new products and new materials from forest product origins. On the right are the technology companies I mentioned that enable supply chain benefits. This isn't all of what BioApplied does by a long shot, and anyone who knows us will be aware of that. But these, I think, are relevant to today's discussion. And my typical role with them have been as an agent for these companies to face customers, to unite the supply chain and to support their business activities. With Celluforce and Performance Biofilments, producing both cellulose nanocrystals and cellulose nanofibrils, access to market opportunities, testing the value proposition, engaging with industrial partners, producing joint development agreements, and ultimately collaborations to move the needle on both TRL and CRL. On the right-hand side, FP Innovations launched what back in the day was called FPDAT. It's really a sensor device and GPS device on lead harvest equipment for forest operations. It measured uptime and downtime and guided operators in their harvesting path. So it really was a tool for productivity in the supply chain. It helped identify operational issues. Maybe there was downtime. Why? It was caused because the fuel truck hadn't arrived. It wasn't scheduled in sync with what the needs were of that lead harvest equipment. Perhaps it was that the maintenance program hadn't been properly followed and the equipment went down for maintenance, or that there was a part that wasn't available. So it surfaced a lot of knowledge of what was happening in the field and gave some data to work with. Sentry, it's a simple device as well for monitoring. It measures real-time BOD in wastewater treatment plants and the input capabilities for anaerobic digestion systems to fully optimize and get the best of operations in those different operations. So biorefineries, critical aspect is the wastewater treatment process. Protecting the rivers and fresh water is also critical. So here's a device that can give you 24/7 look as to how those microbes are performing, not available in any other way at this point in time. So an advancement in technology that really helps to improve on the costs of a biorefinery. St. Anne and Sedna, this is a little bit outside of the forest sector, a supply chain technology ultimately to monitor the life of a live lobster from the boat of Nova Scotia to the market destination somewhere in Asia. The Asian customer receives their shipment and needs to process a claim of up to 50% of the value of the shipment because half of the lobster arrive dead, the mortality rate as we called it. So monitoring the shipment with technology throughout the supply chain to pinpoint when these issues occur so that supply chain corrective actions can be taken and improve the mortality rate of the lobster. and also help either support or refute claims was an advancement in as well in terms of supply chain visibility and measurements vital for this precious commodity. Stratify, the final one here in my set of examples, it's an early stage Canadian clean tech company with a brilliant engineering team based out of Ottawa. They develop end-to-end IoT solutions for workforce-based industries. They develop the full stack, the hardware, which is the sensors and the gateway, the firmware, the cloud-based information architecture, and the software for apps and APIs. The applications can vary, but the current focus is on commercial refrigeration equipment monitoring for the food service industry, covering the entire supply chain where refrigeration is used, from the processing operation to warehousing to commissaries to restaurants, grocers, institutions, and more. So the net effect is reduced loss and spoilage of food, better safety, reduced energy consumption, streamlined operations, and ultimately better management decision making. What's exciting about all these technologies is that they are really early stage at accumulating data streams. And of course, data becomes the basis for AI and machine learning. And in some of these cases, there is a pipeline of development available from that technology and from those data streams that's going to bring more and more value to those supply chains. The next slide, I like to throw this in when I can. It's kind of a hopeful slide for me. It's taken from the billion-ton study done in the US by, I think it was the Department of Energy. And it shows for 1 billion tons of available biomass, where can that go? What products and uses can it be put to that can bring value to that biomass? And as you can see, the list is phenomenal. There are so many things that can be made from biomass. It's really quite incredible. We're finally tuned to the problem of carbon emissions and see the displacement of these products that are currently made by fossil-based carbon products as a real opportunity. So it's encouraging to see what's possible. I think what we really have to do is look at this realistically and say, what is probable? If we go to the next slide, what we looked at from Celluforce and Performance Biofilm's perspective when bringing those new products to market is to understand, what pain points are being addressed, what's the fundamental market we're trying to capture, and what's the essence of the business case. And, if you strip away all the things that we often talk about, whether it's policy, regulatory, new carbon offset markets, or what have you, it ultimately comes to, and I know those will have a play, but it ultimately comes down to cost and quality, or performance. I kind of link performance and quality to be one and the same. And it's that cost and performance that have to measure up at the end of the day to satisfy the value and the demand for that value that's expected on the other side of the equation. So that's what has to be understood and assessed, that compelling business case that says you have the cost and performance to achieve the value and meet the demand. Of course, in that business case, you need to assess a lot of things, including, of course, the complexity and the time and the effort that it's going to take you to get there. So on the next slide, and I've heard this mentioned several times today as well, the famous Valley of Death. I don't know if anyone else mentioned it, but I like to also refer to it as the channel of birth, because when you look at the other side of it, through all that pain and risk comes the reward. It's an oversimplified chart, of course. It really is the dynamic between money and time. And if anything, my experience will tell me is that we always underestimate the time that's required. Pretty much any problem can be solved if you put enough talent and time and energy to it. The scientists, the engineers, they'll make it happen. I've seen it. It works. The question is that where they should be putting their time and effort to resolve those issues, and how much time is it going to take? The other thing that isn't well illustrated in this chart is the supply chain and the necessity to align that supply chain to get the product to market. And the supply chain throws a lot of complexities into the mix. And if we advance the slide, again, a simple chart to say, you know, a supply chain is just made of these links of one input going into a value-added process to produce another output, which becomes the input for another value-added process. And as you kind of link all that supply chain together, whether it's even inside of a biorefinery and all the links of the chain that would be within the given organization, quite often there's supply chains that cross a lot of different ownership that result in a lot of different compatibility issues with one technology or another, that have changing budgets, perhaps because of changing ownership, supply and demand fluctuations, competition not only from other products or potential sources of supply, but from competing priorities as well. Personnel that are engaged in a project but then change because the project has taken 6 months and now they're either with another company or have gone on to another project. There's a lot of dynamics that happen within any given supply chain that can disrupt a project, that can add time and complexity and go back to that challenge of getting past the valley of death. And of course, all these as well represent cost. Here's an illustration, again, oversimplified, but of the biomass supply chain, really from the stump or the field all the way to a consumed end product. And think of the different processes and costs that are a part of that supply chain and how the product is harvested, how it's handled, transported, stored, preconditioned, processed, packaged, sold. An estimate down at the ABLC conference in San Francisco back in 2025 was $5 in the field is $35 in the market. So that's 86% of the cost of the product is in the supply chain. And that's very significant, certainly when it comes to biomass. So if I flip the story a bit, the next slide tells us, I think you skipped a slide, possibly. No, maybe not. Okay, I think I might have. So 2 slides down, I guess I was wanting first to show product mix. If you take to the next slide, there we are. This is actually an illustration of the petroleum industry product mix, where 96% of the volume for a refinery is driven by base commodity fuels. 4% is really the higher end specialty products of chemicals, plastics, rubbers, those types of materials. But that 4% drives 42% of the volume. So that specialty product mix is essential to a refinery's viability. And I liken that then to performance biofilaments and cellulose, producing new cellulosic materials to the world. They're not standalone companies. They really fit at the end of a long supply chain and are another output of a biorefinery, taking pulp as a feedstock and bringing additional value to that pulp and producing new products to the world, to the marketplace. If we look back at that previous slide, Andrea, I'm not sure who's driving the slides. This is a focus more on the supply chain. As I mentioned, the biomass supply chain represents significant costs from stump to field. Investment and continued investment in new and emerging supply chain technologies is essential. So companies I mentioned earlier are examples of those real-time monitoring to give a view and oversight of the supply chain to drive efficiency and improvements. And that data that's accumulated allows us to get to predictive technologies. If we can know the future, you can do something about it. And making decisions, as CEO once told me, it's what we get paid to do. This is what is work. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially when we're held accountable for those decisions. So decisions need to be made on equipment replacement, on budgets, forecasts, personnel, essentially all business operations. and data is the means to make good business decisions. So having your supply chain, again, representing a bigger part of the cost, with great visibility through some of these technologies and investments in those technologies, produces a good ROI. The last hit here is collaboration. This is my favorite. I think we've all heard of it. It deserves a spotlight. It seems simple, but it's not. It is and remains the most fundamental and promising tool by which organizations will be a success, whether bringing new products to market, strengthening the supply chain, reducing costs, improving productivity, understanding markets, and more. It's really not AI. It's the people-facing part of the business. It's tapping the intellectual capital of the companies with whom we do business, and it's breaking down those silos, and it's surfacing what needs to be known and understood, especially the more you can do it in the early stage of a project, you're going to better understand what time issues you're going to be facing to overcome that valley of death. So I'll just wrap up. Strip away policy on the last slide, strip away policy support, strip away other economic drivers. Not advocating for that at all. But if we strip it down just to its essence of the business case that's market driven, and that there can be a compelling business case, and we address the costs and the quality performance. We apply a mix of product for cost effectiveness, and we invest in supply chain technology, and we focus on people and collaboration for success. We'll build resilient Canadian companies, and we'll build resilient supply chains to get product to market. That's it for me, Megan. I don't know how my timing was, but hopefully it was all right.
Your timing was all right. I was gonna put up a little sign, but you wrapped it up pretty quickly, so appreciate that. Thanks so much, Greg. And we've got one more speaker before we take some questions. If I can have Alex Billick jump on. And
Yep,
Alex,
I'm
if
here.
you can turn your camera on. Oh, I see you. Awesome. Okay. Can you try sharing your screen? And if for some reason that doesn't work, I will. There we go. All right. So welcome, Alex, from Silvacom. I'm assuming you will give a quick little introduction about yourself and Silvacom before you start diving into a little bit of intel.
Sure thing. So
Thanks.
appreciate you inviting me to speak, and I'll try to keep it entertaining here. Last one of the day, so it's always rough. But we'll dive into this. So I'm going to come at this a little bit differently, but I hope it helps show an opportunity. I'm going to be focusing on a case study. So what I really want to focus on here is leveraging existing information. So I'm a little bit about me. I've been with Silvacom for 5 years. I'm a forester by training. I'm a registered professional forester in Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. So understand a little bit of policy nuance that happens between our jurisdictions here. But really focused in the remote sensing, GIS, LiDAR, drones, forest inventory space as a specialty. Silvacom itself has been around quite a while, since 1983, headquartered in Alberta, but with offices across Canada, a wholly Canadian-owned forestry consulting firm that is now diversified into a group of 7 companies here. I'm not going to go into the details of who's who there, but you may have come across some of those logos. We also are a partnership-driven organization. We have some strategic partnerships, including Wyvern, which is a Canadian satellite company. We are an Esri Gold partner. We are also a non-Indigenous member of the Canadian Council of Indigenous Business and Safe Software FME. We're really focused in this forestry space, land restoration, a lot of those sort of adjacent spaces. And where I think it ties into the discussion here is going up the supply chain into what is the available biomass and what are some of the challenges that the forest industry is facing that might present opportunities for some of these downstream users. So we've got a number of different specializations across the company. But what I really want to focus on today is this. Next 4 is an initiative run by CRIBE, which is a Center for Research in the Bioeconomy. This is right from their website, and the link is available down below there if you'd like to check this out. This is a recent case study that was just published, I believe, last week. And this is looking at unlocking hardwood potential and investment opportunities in the Thunder Bay region. And I'm going to use this as a case study to show you what is possible when we dive into existing resources, existing inventories, and ask new questions. From the exact same type of analysis that we did in Saskatchewan, I believe it was back in 2022, the One Sky OSB mill is starting to break ground. So we've done this a few times across Canada, but this is a recent one done in Thunder Bay, Ontario, to focus on what is the basically try to attract some investment to the region and undergo a study to actually quantify it. So our project purpose, the guiding purpose of this, was to work with CRIBE on their goal of increasing available information on wood supply for investment attraction to the Thunder Bay region. If you're familiar with CRIBE, you've probably seen their Forest Edge tool. It's designed to make some information accessible to folks that might be interested in the bioeconomy. The purpose of this project was to demonstrate that the region has sufficient hardwood fiber and that fiber has a profile in terms of log size to support a variety of different hardwood producing facilities with available bioapplications as well. The challenge, I mean, it's multifaceted here, but the motive for this is working to address the declining hardwood utilization rate, which is occurring across the province. At the same time, we see that our growing stocks are increasing in the hardwood, with mixed woods especially increasing. And what that means is, from a forestry perspective, we can't just go in and take the conifer for the lumber production. We have to have end uses for the hardwood that is mixed in with it. When we're talking about hardwood in the boreal context, we're talking about mostly trembling aspen and paper birch as the two, with trembling aspen making up the largest percentage of that. But what's happening is that our significant softwood volume is being locked up in the hardwoods and these mixed woods, and so we need to figure out how do we attract investment to target the hardwood utilization such that the existing forest industry can continue. So that motive is tied entirely to that first link in the supply chain. The why, though, this project was needed because although there are provincial inventories, we have a provincial forest inventory that between 2005 and by the end of 2028, we will have spent almost $210 million on as a province, going through 2 rounds of. It is not what I would call an investment grade forest inventory. It's not designed for investment and traction. It's designed to answer a lot of different questions for extensive forest management. And so while we've got these provincial inventories, state of the forest reports, and other information sources, they lack some critical things that investors needed. So we sat back and we said, what does investment grade forest inventory look like? And really quantified that, and then said, do we have the information to support building such an inventory without going and collecting new information? And the answer is yes, because Ontario especially has been doing long-term forest measurements going back until 1992 with the Growth and Yield program. So we have long-term plots where we have multiple remeasurements to understand how our forests are growing and changing. And with that information, we can actually project forward and say this is what the forest growing stock is going to look like into the future, including that critical log profile information and understanding how much does it, not only where is the fiber, what does it look like, but how much does it cost to get that from the forest to the facility of interest, because that's a big piece of this question. So that's what our study focused on, and it is all publicly available now. The approach was to leverage that existing forest inventory where it was available, the forest sample plots from the provincial plot network grid, and then the haul costs, which are driven by a number of different factors, including distance, obviously being a big part of that, as well as what is the road network availability. What we looked at is saying we don't want to have to go collect new information if we don't have to. And just for our study area alone, there were over 600 provincially managed forest plots that we were able to use to go ask this question and build a regionally calibrated model that was able to actually answer some of these questions. The methods, well, we began with fiber supply. We use the inventory and the forest plots to calculate what our log profile looks like for the region. We then assessed what the haul costs are in tiered increments throughout the region based on distance and travel time. That was it by talking to a few industry experts to say what are the biggest drivers of cost, and then how can we do this in a way that we don't break down into a model that is very complex to try to scale. We brought these assessments together to determine both the current opportunity based on allocated volumes, so for existing facilities where it's already allocated, as well as the potential opportunity that is available for the entire merchantable growing stock. So what can the land base support and what is currently allocated? Our study area comprised an area of over 4 million hectares of productive crown forest around the Thunder Bay region here. These are organized in a tenure system called Sustainable Forest Licenses. And so they are all managed by SFL managers that understand what the volume availability is. We work with them and they are governed by forest management plans, which are 10-year documents that are being redone between 2029 and 2031, actually. So we are coming to the end of the existing forest management plans and into the next cycle. So this represents an opportunity. We have a very strong forest sector with very few hardwood users in the area. The focus, again, like I said, was on common merchantable hardwood species, so poplar and birch, and we explored multiple scenarios. Cut to length at 2.5 meters, 5 meters, and tree length, because there's different ways that you can cut the tree and haul it, and it impacts all these different costs. And then we were looking at not just existing engineered wood products, but also the bio applications as well. And if I'm breaking down the major findings here, we have substantial hardwood volumes available in the region beyond what the provincial available wood report would suggest. We're in the 1.3 to 1.4 million cubic meters a year in available wood supply. The haul costs here are similar to those presented by Cribe's Forest Edge. So using Forest Edge, there's going to be some inflationary pressures here. There's fuel costs and other things that change that, but we've got an understanding of those that are jiving with other provincial tools. The average log size was between 20 and 24 centimeters. Moderate reductions in recovered volume if we go into cut to length scenarios for poplar, but there's significant reductions for birch that has to do with the way that the tree grows and where forks can occur along the stem. But there's potential for changes to sustainable hardwood harvest levels in the upcoming forest management plan. So we are at an inflection point where if someone identified a regional need, we might actually be able to make more of this fiber available because these plans are coming up for renewal very shortly. The Thunder Bay region is an ideal location for hardwood processing with good market access and a variety of transportation links, and there is operational synergy between the hardwood and softwood facilities. So the big opportunity here is based on the volumes currently allocated but not utilized, a variety of facilities can be supplied. And we looked at a few different scenarios of what that could look like. So engineered wood products, whether that's oriented strand board or laminated strand lumber, ability to consume a large proportion of the fiber supply. I think anchoring it in some kind of an engineered wood product first would then open up opportunities for those liquid biofuels to consume both low-grade logs as well as mill residuals in a synergistic fashion. And then have veneers and plywood come on, which we can't anchor an industry around necessarily because they don't consume enough and they need the best quality wood. But as Greg showed from the petroleum industry, there might be the opportunity to extract extremely high value products once we've got some place to go with consuming the bulk of the material. So there's a lot of synergies that start to happen if we find these kinds of opportunities. So in conclusion here, we've got an untapped potential. The region's forests can deliver greater substantial hardwood volumes both now and into the future. We've got diverse opportunities that are presented both in the solid products as well as the biofuels and other downstream users. Thunder Bay's got a lot of different interesting synergies of its location, good infrastructure of a variety available, the synergies with the mining sector. So what we hope that this can show is that if there are other areas of interest, go to the cupboard and find what information exists already and try and develop a case study like this to be able to say what are the opportunities in this space. This entire case study for investment attraction was done without needing to go collect new information. And it's been signed off by all of the SFL managers as saying, yes, these numbers jive with our understanding of the forest as well. And so we're putting this forward as an investment attraction opportunity. So appreciate the opportunity, and let's turn challenges into opportunities is how I'd like to end it. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alex. Appreciate that, and really appreciate the acknowledgement that we have a lot of the information out there. It's just a matter of how we actually compile it, put it together, and then use it from an investment attraction perspective. So I'm going to ask Andrea, Alex, and Greg if they wouldn't mind sticking on for a minute, and we can ask a couple of questions before we sound off for the day. So Alex, there's a question in the chat. How can we leverage our resource endowment to build resilience in our manufacturing sectors? So based on what the case study that you talked
All
about.
right. Yeah. All right. I'll take a run at it again I come at it from a forester's perspective. So I'll do my best to sort of take a step back now and say, you know, forestry is a hilarious example of what other sector operates with so little understanding of their inventory. It's very challenging to try to look at it and come at it from that engineering perspective, and when you're used to, so how do we leverage it? I think it's by looking at it province by province because each one's unique. The ownership of the data is unique. And then saying, well, what are our best candidate sites based on the other drivers of investment? So population density, where we've got access to infrastructure, where are the brownfield opportunities, and then see if we can tie that in and say, well, what does the feed basket look like? What is marketably feasible for being able to move material? And use that to start to drive it rather than doing a pan-Canadian shotgun approach. I think that'd be the challenges. We've got too much land base. We've got to focus our efforts to areas first and then see. Now, that's challenging because you don't want to politically pick winners and losers, and we might be missing an opportunity as well. But I think that's the biggest challenge is just in the short term, we need to pick a few scenarios where there's a high likelihood of an outcome and make a few calculated bets.
Appreciate that. It's a little bit of chicken and egg too, right? And when we're dealing with our resource-based sectors, you mentioned something about understanding exactly what we've got. We have a lot of that information, province to province, sector to sector, biomass and feedstock to biomass and feedstock. But what we don't do is leverage it in terms of the opportunity that it could potentially create. Andrea, there's a specific question for you. Can you expand on how and why you diversified your market into the EU, the viability and even growth of your company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's important to remember that, by and by, Greenfield in terms of, biofuel specifically is able to sell everything into the domestic market. That has, been the long-standing case. The diversification really came about when we saw, kind of two things happening at the same time. One of it was, an increase in terms of American ethanol production, right? And this, happened in, a free trade context. Greg, I really liked your history lesson. I'm not too far behind you in a lot of ways, right? But yeah, so a lot of that, kind of, we saw an over blending of ethanol over and above what the policy mandate was, which is fantastic, right? Like that's great for a long-term business. That's obviously very, very good for the environment as well, too, from a GHG reduction perspective. But it did mean that there was a little bit displacement that potentially could have happened. At the same time, Canada signed a free trade agreement with the EU, right? So, so that became a market opportunity for us there. It didn't, mean that, we were abandoning the Canadian market in any way, shape, or form, and we still, do sell the majority of our ethanol here very, very locally, sourced from local corn. It's made in Canada. It's sold to Canadian blenders and refiners, but taking advantage of having that other market opportunity given U.S. overproduction was important as a hedge. And the other thing as well too is there's a very rigorous sustainability criteria component to it as well, right? So we knew that that was going to take some time to get that certification, and I think that there are other ethanol producers that are also pursuing that from the same type of perspective now as well too.
I appreciate that. The whole EU market opportunity, I think, was a little bit of a sleeping giant for us as a nation.
Yeah.
We were so used to working and trading with the US that we had no urgency or push to change. And when push came to shove, when the new administration came in and started turning the tables, that opportunity really opened up. And frankly, I think it's a matter of a significant opportunity for us to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think the Ferris wheel is definitely coming back around, Megan. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've got one more question for Greg before we wrap up. So, Greg, do you not see a need for policy support to force change that the markets might not support?
Well, I'm pleased to get this question because I don't want anybody leaving here thinking that I in any way am a proponent for eliminating some of these policies and methods by which we can support. My comments were really meant to try to get to a base case without, and if you could do so, then you've probably got a winner in that it's going to be market driven. Certainly policy drives markets as well in a number of ways. I was very disappointed, when it looked like carbon pricing, not carbon tax, but carbon pricing was going to fall off the table because I understood the logic of it, and it did start to balance the tables somewhat. So this industry, as is the case for most, works on volume. Volume reduces cost, and it's then a virtuous cycle that you can get cheaper products to market or at lower cost and be more competitive and increase your volume and run large facilities and plants. Getting up to that state of volume is the challenging part. So bioplastic can't come and replace a petroleum plastic at a small volume and expect to be competitively priced. And this is where policy can help make an adjustment in the marketplace until such time as a bio-based product can fly on its own and generate the volumes in order to reduce their supply chain costs. So I do think support and policy is needed, maybe not to force the market, but I think the reality is a lot of it is vaporizing, a lot of it's going in a different direction. So we need to know, to be resilient, how we can operate maybe with less so or with not as much and still be a success. We've talked about the European market, and I love the idea, and it still has a high regulatory environment for which we need to comply when shipping into that market.
Yep.
But the reality is we've got a high bulky item, and the big market right next door is the more realistic trading partner for us. So we have to weather that storm in some fashion, and we are somewhat caught in the middle perhaps. So we need to navigate our way through that as well.
I appreciate that. Also, I think that we are so used to trading with the US in terms of our raw goods. We are still hewers of wood and haulers of water, however that analogy works. But we can do a lot of the value add, at least primary transformation here in Canada as a starting point before exporting goods. And if we can just add one more piece of the value chain here in Canada, the economic opportunity that represents is significant. And frankly, I think aligning ourselves more with the European market is really where those new opportunities lie. It's just a matter of us as a nation prioritizing, figuring out how we're going to meet them, and then putting a focus around investment and towards meeting those opportunities. So I'm going to wrap up because we're a couple minutes over, but I wanted to thank all of our presenters today. So thank you very much for sticking with us. Really appreciate it. I put a little note in the chat because I've had about a dozen emails since we got started earlier today. If you want an introduction to any of our presenters, I'm more than happy to make it, hoping you can connect around projects, opportunities, business, whatever floats your boat. Thanks again for joining us today. Thank you to my staff who's helped to support, and thank you to Lambton College for partnering with us, Andrea and Kelly and Preeti. Really appreciate your time and effort, and we look forward to doing 2026 BioDesign virtual conference again. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Have a great afternoon.